Splendid Abodes, the official podcast of Toronto Thelema. Exploring, if you will, practical philosophy, from the science and the workings of the mind to spirituality, esotericism, and magic. Stooping down, dipping my wings, I came into the darkly splendid abodes. As we wrap up Season 5, Michael and I chat about Enochian grammar, respond to listener comments, and discuss controversies surrounding Aleister Crowley. Satanist, racist, and possibly something far worse still. Listener discretion strongly advised for the last half hour.
How long have we been recording?
8 minutes and 55 seconds.
Okay, so we got some of the stupid banter out of the way. Let's just say hi. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law.
Love is the law, love under will.
Yo, Darren, you did a... Hey,
way to go.
This is contrived. Hey, Darren, you did a talk for the like a workshop thing on Enochian language for Toronto Thelema this weekend. Is that true? How did it go?
Went really well. The only problem was we scheduled it unbeknowingly on the same night as a Behemoth concert.
Oh, okay.
So
yeah,
we lost. You know how the
70% of your
Behemoth.
regular audience.
So, I mean, to be honest with you, I love Behemoth, and I've seen them a couple of times myself. So I'm not like, but it's like, maybe do a show when I'm not doing a workshop.
Come on, guys, for real, put it together. My claim to fame is that I used to serve coffee to the person that dresses Behemoth.
Really?
Yeah. There's the brand is called, I forget. It's a real. You could put it in the show notes. There's a really sexy fashion brand.
I'll put a AI voice with somebody else's voice giving the brand name over top. There's
this really sexy bespoke fashion brand that you can go to their shop page and all the pieces are one of a kind. But she also dresses Behemoth.
Cool.
And I used to,
they're adults. I thought might be able to dress themselves.
It's like a stylist position. But she used to come in every day and get coffee from me back when I was doing coffee.
Wow. Yeah, that's cool.
That's the only thing I know about Behemoth. I don't think I've heard one of their songs. Are they fresh?
Oh, they're pretty fresh. I mean, they're kind of. You could argue that they're quite contrived and kind of posers. I'm probably not going to win a lot of fans by talking smack like that.
Yeah,
I really like them, but
unlike all the other heavy metal music I've ever heard, this is contrived.
Yeah. No, it's I think one of the
if you're not burning down churches, you don't count.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it's like the one thing that stands out about them is they write heavily on the subject of Thelema. But yeah, so for instance, they have this one song that's pretty cool that's called "O Father, O Satan, O Son," and it's at one point it's just basically reciting the Crowley's translation of the barbarous names from Liber Samek. So, and it's really cool. It's actually pretty cool. It's like it's got this build up to it. It feels like legitimate ecstasy building work.
Yeah.
I dig it. That particular album, The Satanist, is like a top tier. Excellent album.
Your favorite band are the more authentic Ghost, right? The grounded and authentic grassroots organization.
Well, like
Ghost.
I say, some would say that Behemoth are contrived and inauthentic and fraudulent.
But not
me.
I would never say that.
I listen to them anyway. I'm not going to pretend that Ghost. But yeah. I listen to also. I've been listening to a lot of Hall and Oates lately.
Oh yeah.
If you're looking for somebody who's not a poser, then maybe I'm not your man.
Every accusation is a confession.
Yeah. Exactly.
I will refrain from making any accusations for the rest of the episode because I do not wish to be seen.
Yeah, you know what? I was just catching myself that it's like, that's good, actually. I appreciate that before I walk over that entirely. But I was just going to say that I wanted to stop things suddenly because I was like, well, you know what? Nobody's going to want to listen to this senseless banter before we get, like, waiting for us to get to the point of the episode. And then I remembered we're doing a checkup episode.
Right. And so we're just, obviously the point of these is to just review some stuff that we've discussed over the season. Very often this is where the climax of the thesis we've discovered, where we get to put a few things together.
This is the climax of something. It won't be the climax of our listenership because our views.
Well, the first thing I want to do in this least listened to episode of our season is to say that you guys should really be listening to these.
It's nice to speak into the void once in a while.
Because we don't allow ourselves the opportunity to speak to beginners under normal circumstances because there's too much of that shit out there. And so we tend to go, in at the deep end to just like to chew on specific texts that we hope you've already read. But what I was noticing is that the Twin Peaks episodes were sort of like day one introductions to Thelema and what it is and what the crises could hypothetically look like. And then the 2001 episode very usefully expanded on some of those concepts and let us get into some other ways of looking at the crisis of the Master of the Temple, the crossing of the abyss from, a psychological perspective, from a sci-fi perspective, from even from an occult perspective about the mystery of other minds and stuff. And so these ones that are least listened to, and maybe it's okay because there's so much beginner material out there that why do we need more beginner material?
That was the whole impetus behind this, was not to just do.
But if people are interested in, if you have a friend who's never heard of Thelema, but you still for some insane reason want to recommend the podcast to them, one of these peripheral episodes is actually more of a gateway, serves as more of a gateway drug unintentionally. And then these check-in episodes, we sort of get to wrap things up and vamp about the material that we've discussed. I think that can sometimes be very useful too. Although we sort of did that 2 episodes ago with our last kind of Divine Feminine episode. We got a lot of wrap-up material in there. But I'm really curious about your... so what was the talk about? Something about the syntax of Enochian language or something? Like, what was the discussion?
So basically, I started trying to memorize the calls, the Enochian calls. The idea being that I was using them, I was getting back to using them, and I felt like driven to memorize them. I felt like that was something almost like it was expected of me in order to get better results and stuff.
Okay.
So I started working on memorizing them. And as I was doing it, I was trying to specifically steep myself in the meaning of the words so that it wasn't just rote memorization.
Oh, for sure.
But by heart, So
much easier if you know the language. So you're not just speaking,
you're just
by
rattling
phonetically.
Off, barbarous names, so to speak. In the process of doing that, trying to sort of let the words roll them over in my mind and play with my familiarity with these other languages like Latin and Hebrew and whatnot. It's like it was fun to discover. Okay, you know what? There's actually ways you can think of these words, and I felt like that came in a different way than just, you would otherwise get if you're just sitting down as a sort of scholar and doing it in your head kind of work, analyzing things from that perspective. I feel like when you're actually infusing them into yourself, it's a different perspective on it. But it just sort of, that was, I was excited about that. And one of the things we were talking about lately as far as the workshops go is like, it's really an excuse for us to talk about things we're excited about, you know,
Yeah.
rather than
which
sort
is
of
okay.
like,
Yeah, of course.
So whether or not it's other people's interest is like secondary to some extent. It's like we're not just going to specifically look for attention grabbing subjects, and we're not just going to do introductory material necessarily or anything like that. But basically, giving the layout of the general sort of reception of the language and the alphabet and that sort of thing, and then looking at different ways you could think of the vocabulary, the syntax going on, not the vocabulary, but the grammar and the syntax kind of thing. Basically, it's really neat when you start looking at it because it does seem. First and foremost, I'd like to say a lot of these other writers, like Donald Laycock, for instance, who does the complete Enochian dictionary.
Yep.
He's probably the first go-to that most people would think of just because of the nature of like the title of that book. Or Aaron Leach, who does the Angelical Language set of books.
That two volume set.
Yeah, so we've got those authorities on the subject. But I feel like even, throughout all these different books on Enochian, as many as there are people who are practicing, studying, and writing about Enochian, it still feels to me like a small sort of group of people. If we had a larger group of people, a larger pool of people studying this stuff, we would probably get much more interesting results. But one of the problems with having a small group of people is that we all kind of repeat the same biases and assumptions about things. So like Donald Laycock writes that, it seems like Enochian is pretty similar to English, or it seems like Enochian is like, from my studies, it doesn't seem like the angels, if they were really angels, really delivering something, I would expect them to deliver something more profound. These kinds of assumptions, so we end up with these biases, especially with dismissive rhetoric like that, that kind of colors our approach to these things, Like just the idea that Enochian is very similar to English. That stuck in my head all these years just from having read it that way. And as I was actually working through, because like anytime I would look at the calls, I would kind of see, like, you sort of see, okay, it lines up with the English pretty perfectly. So yeah, it does seem like, okay, I can understand why that grammatically seems less likely to be a very different language from English. But when you're going through it, and really getting to know the language and that sort of thing, there's some stark differences as well. And it almost feels like the grammar of the angelical language is almost like a go-between. It's like it's meeting the English translation halfway, but the English translation still bears marks of being a translation. With any translation, if you're doing like translation from Latin, for instance, a literal translation, if you're just doing it word for word, would be ugly and meaningless. It would not be idiomatic.
Right. And we talked about this a little bit before. People who don't spend a lot of time thinking about language can refer to our episode on, what was it, where we're complaining about the Latin footnotes?
Oh, yeah, that was the Wake World.
We're going to refer to our episode on Wake World, where you can see how unlike Latin is to English, because the literal translations of the Latin that were in the footnotes not only do they make nonsense in English, but they are so unlike what is being driven at by the author who composed the Latin. Not every language has a word that means ah. Not every language has a word that means the. Exactly. Not every language has a word that means is. There are ways of doing these things with words, if you like, but they could be handled differently. They might be handled with suffixes or handled with assumptions. There's something
context.
Because I'm not a linguist, I might get this wrong, but there's something in like biblical Hebrew called like maybe the infinitive form or something, which is not even something we use in English, but is very important. Like biblical Hebrew is an easy language to learn because there's such a small vocabulary. You need to learn 10,000 words or something like that, and but there's some grammatical things that are important to integrate that are different if you're an English learner. So to say that it's similar to English would mean that like one of the things that might mean is that there's a word for everything in Enochian that there is a word for in English.
And which is clearly not the case. For instance, like you say, the definite article, the doesn't seem to exist in Angelical. It doesn't exist in Latin, and there's nothing that appears in the Angelical or anything like that. And also, I'm glad you mentioned the Hebrew. I was kind of thinking, should I save this, and if I end up posting my workshop recording?
Right.
But it's like, well, I don't need to save these things. I'm not it's not one of those branding things. It's like, I want to get the information out there.
Right, sure.
So it's like, and nobody listens to
it's not the twist ending.
Yeah, exactly.
If these podcasts are so dense that if we go over the same material twice, many people might not notice, or they might find it helpful to reintegrate stuff.
Absolutely, yeah. So, speaking of the Hebrew, what you might be thinking of grammatically, or you might not, is the way that it deals with the genitive, and that was a huge tell for me as well. Hebrew deals with the genitive. Well, we're talking biblical Hebrew. I'm not sure about modern Hebrew. There may be differences, but biblical Hebrew deals with the genitive by not changing the ending like it would in Latin. Not, they don't have like the apostrophe S that we would have, or using the word of in English. They actually make no changes to the words whatsoever. So it's the ordering. It's what's called a construct. What you'd end up with is like the example that I pulled from one of my textbooks is Melech Israel, for instance. And so Melech Israel would be king. The word for king is Melech. Israel is, its own word, neither of which has changed any kind of form. You have the word individually, and it means what it means, but then you have Melech Israel, that in that order means king of Israel. So it's like implied in the context.
There's no of. Yeah, you don't need to do it.
It's the construction of the ordering of the word and the context and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and so Enochian seems unlike English in some of these ways.
Mm-hmm. And specifically, it seems to use the construct when it uses the genitive. I was noticing this seems to be the case, but it's difficult to be 100% sure, but it's like something that stuck out to me that I think is worth considering in assessing the language and that sort of thing.
It strikes me that there's different ways of dealing with evidence, and one of the things that you hear is that Enochian is the best evidence of the existence of God because the way it was received, and the fact that there's like a whole language that comes out of this insane reception story. I don't think we really need to tell the whole retell the whole reception story because it's proliferated everywhere, but because of the nuance of the way like Kelly was receiving letters one at a time and Dee was writing the messages down backwards. Yeah. It seems like very difficult that either of them could have faked that. Like it's not like Esperanto or something where somebody just made up a simple code that everyone could learn. It's like it really did come out of this magical work. And so the fact that it's like a coherent language rather than just bibble babble means to some people means that there must have been some sort of spiritual intervention, not necessarily God, but someone was communicating this language. And then other people will try to cast doubt on that by saying like, oh, D was a spy. So like he was used to communicating in code. Maybe this was a code he designed. Or they'll say like, oh, Kelly was a criminal and a forger. So maybe he made up this language in order to con D out of a decent living, like if I can
keep stringing him along. Yeah.
But like we've had this question before of like the evidence shows this, and if we don't trust it, then we don't trust it.
Yeah.
But like to trust it up to a certain point where you believe the story, but then you just think one of them was lying to the other one. Well, it would have been impossible for one of them to lie to the other one in such a sophisticated way
over such a protracted period of time.
So like if there's a lie, it's that the whole story is made up. And so this question of like, oh, is it a code? Like, is it just a way of expressing thoughts in German or in Italian or in some known European language, but that will be opaque to the casual reader who doesn't have the code key? Or like, and if so, why is the code key, 1,500 pages of dense text? And
that wasn't even the entirety of it. A lot of it was apparently destroyed by the maid before they discovered that it was value to it.
And if it does have, if it does have a grammar and syntax of its own that is somewhat unlike other European languages, then what is its value as like a code that you would, D would be. If D is really a spy and he's sending this to, like, I don't know, Christopher Marlowe or something so he can read it, why don't we have Marlowe's writings in the same code
anything else
and like
anywhere else?
It's so
and then it's in another perspective on that as well is like I would say with the idea of the code, it's pretty much like you can make a determined decision about how you want to approach things. But if you're humming and hawing about like whether it's a ciphered code or if it's like a con job or if it's an actual angelical language, in my mind, it's kind of like at some point you just have to make a choice.
Right.
And so if we're going to take it seriously as a language, then we have to be all in so that we can give it a real chance and actually deal with it on its own terms. Because if you're looking at it as a cipher, you would do the same thing. You want to really just approach it and really approach it as a cipher and not be kind of like, humming and hawing about it. So, and is it hard to commit to the idea that it's an angelical language and it's actually what it purports to be? And, meanwhile, there's also this idea that could all be fake. Well, we're into spirituality, people.
Yeah.
It's like there's some degree of like taking a chance and treating it like it's actually the thing it claims to be, But as far as the cipher thing goes, like there again, we have like that thing about like Donald Laycock, for instance. He addresses the cipherment thing, and he suggests that because there's the English translation there as well, it's got to be a 1-to-1 thing, and it's the only possible form of cipher it would be is substitution.
Sure.
And to me, that doesn't make any sense to say that. I think that's like a naive. It's a naive statement based on him not knowing cipherment. I don't know cipherment. I don't know ciphers and all this sort of thing. But John Dee sure as hell did. He was fascinated and really into that subject. So for him to claim that that's the only possible, I could very easily, without any knowledge of cipherment, come up with, some other way of substitution, of permutation, of blinds that can have the a missing key that would have everything resolve into place. So the idea that you could just use substitution where you're replacing letters and you end up with this other. He uses the example, for instance, Roar e ta naspes grae ta malpurge. Roar is sun, grae is moon. Your pronunciations may differ, of course. That's a whole thing in itself with Enochian. But roar is R-O-R, and he suggests that, okay, well, if you look up another word for sun, you could take the Hebrew shemesh, which is a clever thing to look at because it starts and ends with shin, and you have the medial M or mem in the center, so it kind of matches up in that respect where roar starts and ends with R, and you have the medial O. But then the moon, Graa, it's Graa, and that doesn't match up in the same way, although you do have two A's, so you could maybe use your imagination. But it's like, just because that doesn't, and like trying to find a Hebrew word for moon as well, it's like that's, to me, is just a sign of lack of imagination.
Right.
And the way of saying that, it's like basically in a dismissive way, it would have to be substitution, and you'd be you can see for yourself that it's not going to actually work. It's a dismissive language that colors the reader's mentality about things and causes the reader to assume that others have done, maybe others with more knowledge and experience and in a higher intelligence or whatever, better capabilities, have already tried to do these things and have failed, so there's no reason for me to bother wasting my energy, in that direction.
Especially if you're a magician. I think Lon Duquette says something like, don't repeat all the Dee and Kelly work, just use the system they received, which sounds like a good idea. Because like you want to get down to doing some magic. And so like all of this little like piffling about around the edges, like nuancing and finessing, and when so many of the authorities on a subject seem to be wrong, there is a certain amount of fluffing around, that needs to be done before you can practice. Yeah,
it's 100% true. So it's like that's the problem. That's the difficulty as far as I'm concerned with Enochian is just the fact that it's like it's overwhelming with all the challenges of trying to, keep your head above water when you're working with it and that sort of thing. So, and at some point you have to make decisions. You have to make decisive decisions like, okay, I'm going to go with the holy table with this layout. And I have my reasoning for it, but I also have that inkling in the back of my head, like, what if I'm wrong, or what if this is a mistake, or something like that. So.
It's not either or, too. Like, I think I've mentioned on the show before that I used to do a lot of theater stuff, and like one example is. I often tried to show up to like the first rehearsal with all the text memorized, and like that was really hard, and I felt like king shit of fuck mountain whenever I was able to do it because I would be right there from day one rehearsing the scene, listening and reacting and discovering what the words meant and being there with my colleagues, and so it's the best way to do it. But also, it's so hard to memorize a text that you haven't looked at yet. If you spend a week or two reading it with people, then you kind of almost know it anyway, and you're just like putting the commas in the right place. So the analogy here being not directly like, hey, you should start reading all these calls every day so that then you can memorize them more easily, but that you can start working right now. Yeah. You can print a table off, the Enochian tables off, at Staples and like glue them to your wall and start reading aloud invocations from literally any beginner book. Yeah. And then write down your results. And if you find but then as you're doing that, also be hand painting your own set of tables that you can swap out, or like, there's this process of deepening into the practice that begins with practice as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a good point. So it can be two things. You can include it's like a yes and kind of situation. So, speaking of which, that makes me think because we were going to maybe take a look at some listener comments and whatnot.
Oh, sure, why not?
But one of them was actually, I'll just read the whole comment. I was just going to address the specific thing that they brought up, but
We're calling this segment "Revenge of Listener Mail."
Yeah, I like it. Maybe we should change the check-in to Revenge of the Listener. So this is on the subject of the Liber 418, Aethers 9 and 4.
Okay.
From Reddit. Magical Mason says, I always enjoy the deep dips, and every now and then go back to the Liber Semek episode as a personal favorite. That's apropos. The only thing missing in this latest was a conversation on any experience y'all have had with it. Have you guys made the journey? So meaning like through the Enochian Aethers. And I think that's like a good point. It's nice I always love when we're able to share experiences for the same reason, because it's nice to actually, instead of just talking about and talking around, it's nice to talk from the perspective of doing the actual work as well.
And so there's a couple of things to say here, and the first is that
involve talking about and around. No, I'm kidding. Sorry, go ahead.
The first is that Liber 418, we talked about this a little during the episode, that there's like this class A-B thing, that it's both holy scholarship, but also like a holy book. So I think our focus was like rightly on dealing with it as a text, as a received teaching that we need to learn things from and evaluate on its own terms.
That's a good point.
But also when you do decide to go through the aethers and explore them and stuff, referring to other people who are authorities, like comparing your own experience to the experience of Crowley, even though the astral world will look like different for you than it does for other people, maybe, especially with the Enochian aethers, where the symbol set is not well defined. Like we don't have a Kabbalah of Enochian where we can go like, hey, this is supposed to be emeralds, but I was seeing tribmoline.
Tribbles.
I was just seeing Star Trek episode, season 3, episode 2, The Trouble with Tribbles. Being able to compare your own experience with what's in the holy books might be one of the only ways to verify the vision and to see that there's genuine spirit contact. So my experience with Enochian mostly is when I was a probationer in the AA, you're supposed to read all the Class D documents and pick practices from them. And that includes Crowley's very limited writings on Enochian. So I didn't finish in the 1 year that I was doing my probation, but I started painting the Enochian tables, and I went through a bunch of the files in the earth and the air tables.
Cool.
But I haven't done anything with the aethers. What about you? Have you opened and closed aethers?
Well, with the aethers, I've certainly tried, and not really gotten anything that amazing. So I've worked with Enochian in other contexts and gotten results of varying kinds. But with the aethers in particular, I seem to have trouble. And that's what part of my response is I couldn't speak for Michael, but basically it's been a crapshoot for me. But I haven't gotten the kinds of flashes and bangs that people tend to talk about with the aethers. Others seem to talk about it like, it's impossible not to get results. And I think there's a truth to that in the sense that you will get some results. And if you don't see them in the actual sort of meditation or scrying work, then you'll see them come seeping through in your life and that sort of thing.
We did miss a Praxis episode this season. It seems to be each season we've chosen a ritual and sort of run through it.
That's true.
And we didn't do one. So maybe for next season, it is worth looking, reminding ourselves of the procedure for open and closing aethers and trying a couple of them.
Yeah.
Maybe we can pick ones that are closer to the outer ring, like do a 28 and a 30 or something like that.
Yeah.
And do an episode where we read them and then another episode where we experiment with them and see what we can
that's a great
about.
idea.
I also was thinking that we also got a suggestion for was it Moonchild or Diary of a Drug Fiend? Someone was saying that there was a little man from another place and a giant in one of the Crowley fictions. Was it Diary of a Drug Fiend or Moonchild that we needed to look at for that?
Oh man, when I was filtering through the comments, I didn't come across that one. So
okay,
I can't remember offhand.
Someone said like, I can't believe you didn't mention. We haven't read it. We haven't read it. We don't know. And someone else said, you guys aren't going to believe this, but Jack Parsons is in, I have read it. Yes, I do. I do believe it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Oh, is it in the same comment about
No, it was two different, two different, you won't believe this.
Yeah, okay. So, but anyway, I'm just going to finish that comment while we're at it. So their comment said, this trip was absolutely transformative and represents a significant milestone for me. I'm assuming talking about going through the 38ers for themselves. I first went through them in 2016, and that experience actually is a big reason that I became a Thelemite, as I came from more of a Barden Hermetics background. Long story short, I had a gap of 7 aethers in my records, and during some other work, I was instructed to fill them in. So that's kind of interesting.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
I've heard this before. My first teacher, not formal, but the first person that I really learned from and got a lot of my attitude from, had started occult life as a Satanist. And it was in order to get more attention from Enochian spirits that he started using the Thelemic symbols.
Ah.
Like until he greeted the angel with like "do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law" and like various AA grade signs, they would show up and just like look at him condescendingly and then disappear again. Like he was a prank caller or something. And so started taking Crowley seriously as a result of experimenting, realizing that the angels would respond to the kinds of symbols Crowley was using. So just one more anecdote in favor of that that position.
And elaborating on that subject, Magical Mason just says, and yes, more of what you're getting from all this is definitely one of the best parts of the podcast for me. I don't have a group to hang out with at the moment, so it's nice to hear people who are actually walking the walk talk the talk. So yeah, and I agree, it's nice to have that element because, and I don't mean that pretentiously or arrogantly or anything like that. I just mean the fact that it's like, again, I don't know if I'm missing some of the content that's out there and stuff because I don't really go over all the content out there or anything like that. I'm not, that super interested in following everything up. But it's like there's enough of it that I've seen that seems very like explaining at you.
There were so many bad podcasts when we were when I was sort of starting out. That I think it's just easy to become disinterested in podcasts, at least occult podcasts.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, there's ones that I like and don't like to varying degrees, but yeah, it's so I think we can be forgiven for ignoring them. Yeah. And if there's 5 great ones that you love, then good for you. That's the.
Yeah, and it's I do agree with the idea of like talking more about actual results and experiences, and maybe not results per se, but like as insofar as we're able to like sharing our actual experiences, so it makes it a real thing and not just something people are talking about and reading about and that sort of thing.
Where do you advertise the Toronto Thelema events? I don't go to them. Where do you do you post those on Facebook, or like for a while I know you were using
Well,
meetup.com?
Thanks for asking, Michael. That enables me to move over to my radio voice.
Yeah.
We posted on Instagram and Facebook, and we also have an EventBrite that we post them on.
All right, well, Magical Mason, follow the Gramstagram, and if you're ever in Toronto, you can see if maybe you can look up a Toronto Thelema event.
Yeah, the nice thing about the podcast is that it does have a wider reach, and of course we have like listeners all over the world, which is kind of cool to be able to say that. It's like I don't really think about it too much because it's you just sort of go about your business and stuff, but saying it sounds like I'm lying.
No, our 16 listeners are from all corners of the globe.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
yeah. It's which is amazing. That sounds like derisive, but any insult is directed internally.
Yeah,
we're glad you're here.
Yeah. But yeah, that's the thing. It's like there's definitely people who are not necessarily near any kind of group or anything like that. And then again, there's also those who are just not interested in getting involved in a group or that sort of thing.
Which is great.
Yeah, there might be, bad experiences that you have with that kind of thing and that sort of thing as well. So it's like... But either way, we're happy to have you here, and we're happy to share things with you, but don't go too crazy.
Solitary practice is totally valid and often more valid.
Mm-hmm.
Glad to be a touch point for people who feel like they need it.
Yeah.
Yeah, any other pressing comments?
We have also, this is these comments so far from Reddit. CH Nubis 777. I don't know if that's Chnubis or Knubis or how to pronounce that, so apologies if I'm completely off, but it's not a real name anyway, I guess. But I've discussed unexpected thelemic ties in with Twin Peaks in many of my own writings, so I am happy to hear others do the same. And that's more of, there's, I guess it's like not really a question, more of a comment, really.
Maybe a subtle advertisement. Where can we read your writings, Knubis? I'm
on the internet. If you haven't checked it out, check out the internet.
I'm open to a peruse.
Yeah, don't be afraid to share, I guess. Thank you very much for that too. It's like it's kind of fun that others are into that subject matter because One thing I've noticed from doing the Spinning Stories episodes is that it gives me so much pleasure to do them. I was surprised how much I enjoy it and how high I get off of doing them. And I guess it's because it's like it gives me a chance to explore two of my biggest passions, which are film and the occult and spirituality kind of subjects. So then, yeah, moving over to YouTube, we have these are kind of obscure. I just like to bounce some of these off of you. And like I say, we don't necessarily
If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. It's okay.
Yeah. Amun Ra Hurakti says a couple of comments, one of which is, quote unquote, Ma'at is the Ka of Ra. And then commented on their own post saying, the Tao is the spirit of the sun. This is in response to Liber 65, I guess I should say. So chapter 4 of Liber 65 that we looked at.
I have no way to evaluate these claims.
That's
I
say, it's the type of thing.
I'm glad you're listening, and I appreciate your input. I neither agree nor disagree.
Yeah. Okay, I guess I should say as well, like one of the difficulties sometimes when people comment things is that it's like without the context, keep in mind we're not listening along, so we're not there in the room at that moment. So you may have like a really cool thing that you're saying. In fact, some people will actually specifically almost like dialectically respond to something that we've said, and they could have a really good point, but when read from the perspective of like, well, we recorded that months and months ago, and I haven't listened back to it in ages, I'm completely not, I have no idea the context. It's like, I just don't know what to make of it, and especially if there's no timestamp, it helps if there's a timestamp just to sort of give it context. So just a heads up there, it's not like a personal thing or anything like that, it's just we have mere flesh brains.
Sad.
Yeah, it's pretty sad, but yeah, so moving on to, okay, so the Gospel according to St. Bernard Shaw, our episode on the Crowley's prolific, long
which
response.
actually turned out to be largely about the Fraser.
Yeah.
But, here we are.
Yeah, it's really cool text that Crowley wrote, actually, because there's a lot of really good stuff to mine out of that. We'll have to return to it probably many times. So Rai Soens, let's assume I got that right. Rai Soens 207 says, it's interesting to consider Christ and Dionysus as Hud and Netzach in relation to Tifereth, and how they are balanced in relation to Jove and Mars, and the paths and the positions on the tree. The thigh of Jove in relation to Samek. That's kind of cool. Thinking of it as like the prop, Samek the prop, and being that central pillar and that sort of thing. It's a much longer comment, so if you want to jump in with anything right there.
Well, yeah. So something in the Paris working, Crowley discovers a sort of Hode version of Christ by going through the Paris working previous, which he's excited about because, this was all new to me. Previously he had only ever thought of Christ in Tefereth. But why Dionysus in Netzach?
I would assume because of the ecstasy of love,
see.
That kind of thing. So like if you picture Liber Astarte, for instance, it's like that union by love and adoration.
Okay. All right.
And then he goes on, Martian war and Christian peace divided by the connecting hanged man in proximity to the devil. Jovian order and Dionysian revelry in relation to the fortune, which is also Jovian. That's fun. And the death in proximity to all these things and the sun. Androgynous gender assumptions. Prometheus fits this rhythm, as well Nike at Netzach, and her siblings as aspects of Jove. Christ and Dionysus and Prometheus in a loving, if brutal, agon or of lower Sephiroth with higher. A family romance of tug of war below the abyss. So yeah, that's kind of fun actually.
I sort of check out a little bit when we get too many like Kabbalistic associations stacked on top of each other, because I feel like people mean something specific by every single layer. It's not necessarily a critique of the comment, because like Crowley does this too, where he'll put a paragraph of just like this equals this equals this equals this, and you have to figure out why this could possibly equal this, and if there one little piece of like occultism is missing, then you just miss the chain and you don't get the conclusion. There was something about Dionysus and Jove in there, and I just was thinking about Nietzsche's Dionysus versus Apollo in Birth of Tragedy. It seems like what he's pointing at is maybe this idea of death and resurrection as being the universal process of initiation or something. And so like, especially when you say like, oh, this is also applicable to Prometheus, it's like, yeah, well, it's kind of applicable to all the sort of like archetypes, like initiatory symbols, because one of the things that initiation is like a rehearsal for death. This is one of the things I wanted to talk about today, actually, because we did so much discussion of initiation throughout the season, and all the little nuances of the different kind of symbol sets involved, or like, this is a holy book about crossing the abyss, so like, let's talk about all the symbols that come out, but like the question of what is initiation at all, this sort of like beginner level question, I think it's challenging to answer. So I think it's worth kind of like mulling that over today a little bit.
That's a great idea.
Yeah. So have we? I know we get more comments than we sometimes have, but often it's just compliments, which I can't.
There's no point in
stand.
just reading every single one.
Disgusting.
But let's see what else we got here. So we did have one that's hurdy-gurdy guy 1 saying, "Dudes, your intro music is way too loud and annoying." And as far as I'm concerned, passion project.
Yeah.
Hey folks, editing Darren here. The following tangent involves Michael and I responding to a listener comment as though it were criticizing my musical intro, in terms of musical style and imposing length. Coincidentally, as I was editing this episode, a friend and collaborator pointed out to me that, on a technical level, the musical intro isn't balanced optimally in terms of mixing, and plays too loud through car speakers, for example. This is a technical adjustment I'll aim to correct in future episodes. That said, I've left our tangent in the discussion, but I wanted to acknowledge awareness of the mistake. We now return you to our musical tangent, already in progress.
There's a meme going around right now about how every podcast opening is terrible.
Oh, yeah.
Like you're trying to show your wife who doesn't listen to podcasts your favorite podcast.
Yeah.
And then it just sharts. It sharts off with a 25-minute, guitar intro of like somebody recorded in their garage, and it's just like, this is the comedy podcast. And so like maybe he's just
well, I think it's particularly this season I went with this like 80s kind of sounding thing that somebody described as sounding like Van Halen or something. So again, it's like I understand entirely. Even in the very first season, we had like people thought of it as like prog rock or prog metal kind of sounding, and like there was one comment on Reddit basically saying like, why are these occult podcast? Why is the occult music always heavy metal or whatever, and it's never rap or some other or hip hop or something like that? And, followed it up with, just kidding. Everybody's taste is their own, so you do you, and it's like that's the thing. You gotta do you.
So you need royalty-free music, right?
That's what most people do. Yeah,
you need royalty-free music, and so Darren, who can actually play music, composes composes and records in the podcast studio here, I assume, brand new intro music for every season.
Yeah,
he's a virtuoso on the guitar and passive.
Oh, thank you.
And a totally passable electronic drummer as well. He's acceptable on the electronic drums. and so we write and record our own music, and it is of course to Darren's very specific, not very contrived. It's got to be authentic heavy metal because that's just what he loves.
Exactly,
he's a real dirtbag. He's not like one of these guys pretending.
I'm a skid. I'm a true skid.
So that's why I have also sometimes recorded music. So maybe, but you wouldn't like mine. Nobody else does. The music I write is specifically designed to ruin your afternoon. So I not upbeat enough for a podcast intro.
I quite enjoy your music, but what it comes down to is it's like it's an excuse to make music for me. So yeah, I understand that it's also kind of an imposition on people because usually people like it when the podcast just kicks in and it gets right down to it and that sort of thing. But I do like having the excuse for the creative output and sort of creating a sort of world to come into and that sort of thing as well. So fuck. Once again, we acknowledge the technical correction needed in the intro and return you to your regularly scheduled programming. This was only a test. In the case of a real emergency, you'd have been instructed where to go. So, moving on, we got, actually, this person, this is on our Twin Peaks The Return, Season 2 and The Return. So, there's 2 comments. The first one is actually a fun little exchange between Albert and Cole, so David Lynch's character, and Miguel Ferreira's character. Or Ferreira, I always forget if I get that right. He's great actor though. And so, Michael, if you'd be so kind, maybe we can read this together here. Do you want to do Lynch? Do you want to do Cole, or do you want to do Albert?
I feel like an Albert today. All
right, loosening up. All right, so Albert, I hate to admit this, but I don't bina this situation at all.
No.
Do you bina this situation, Albert?
Chesed Rose.
It don't get any cheseder. Thank you.
Very well done.
That was a really good Miguel there.
You almost broke.
I almost lost
All I said was no, and you just fell out of your chair.
Well, the funny thing is, I was like, just in case you chose Lynch, I was going to I tried doing the Miguel a couple of times and I couldn't fucking do it. So I'm so glad you did it.
Yeah, Lynch was really good.
So I have an appreciation for how well you did with that. Okay, yeah, no, that was real. I really appreciated that little dialogue that you shared with us. Sorry, that was. Did I name the person? I guess not.
Name and shame.
That was Reese Owens. That's probably what it actually is. I said Rice Owens before. Reese Owens 207, who I think commented.
Let's try to read all these very difficult names in Pig Latin from now on. I think that's a good idea.
Yeah. So Reese goes on to say, also, while my Ruach is still in command, if white and black lodges are a balancing act, they are, in effect, one and the same. The frog-winged, that makes sense with the waiting room, but the frog-winged dove serpent is both and. So instead of, I guess, I was thinking it could have been maybe actually a good guy.
Is it Bob or Laura was, I think, our question.
Yeah.
And I'm convinced it's Bob, and the whole internet is unified in thinking that it's Laura. I can't remember what side you fell down on.
I was kind of playing with the idea, I think, in the podcast at least, that it was like it might have been actually Laura.
Yeah.
Because it was kind of, it does seem sinister initially, but then it's like, crawling in, and it's kind of like, okay, is this going to be the impregnation of Laura, or? But it's a little bit ambiguous, as it probably should be. But yeah, so this is a suggestion that maybe it's both and I'll finish the thought just to see what else we got here. So Judy is neither black nor white, etc.
Yeah. Not in Michael Jackson's dating pool.
Yeah.
Michael Jackson famously will date you if you are black or white.
Yeah. Because he is. So, yeah. Okay, anyway, let's finish that comment. So, I enjoy this channel's videos. You can connect anything to anything. And the Frostland's not necessarily a good thing.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like a
could be
compliment.
schizophrenia, but much appreciated, though. And the Frost Lynch team made this one easy. That's for sure. But I remember hearing Lynch say that he doesn't use his actual dreams. But people don't always tell the truth, and any imagination or vision is a dream.
Yeah, more than one person said this. When I say go dreamy, I mean the same thing David Lynch does. When like the going to that dream place or having a dream, like I will describe my astral work as dreamy as well, because it's the only word that I can come up with, because it doesn't really feel like I've removed myself from my body. It feels like daydreaming, although the results I get are often good enough that I'm like, okay, well, I made some spirit contact here. I just didn't. I'm not aware of having left my body. It feels like daydreaming. So when I say dreamy, I mean like what David Lynch means, of like just kind of phasing out and letting your mind wander, trying to get in touch with Yechida above the Ruach. And so I think a couple people noticed this, like a couple times in the episode, is like, oh, no. You're saying that David Lynch dreamed this and then wrote it in, but he doesn't actually use his dreams. He means something else. I know. Like, I may have misspoken somewhere and given the wrong impression. But yeah, like with, I don't think all imagination is dreaming, but some kinds of daydreams are also dreams. Not in fact, but at least in my parlance. That's how it comes out of my mouth.
Yeah, and I mean, two things on that. One is, it's kind of fun to think of that dreamy aspect of yourself that you're dreaming with, and seems to be at use with that imaginative sort of practice as well. If you think of that as it's, a particular faculty or experiential place to be in, you can imagine where, like, the Egyptians might have described that as one of the sheaths of the soul, but it's still relevant. It's not like like you're not just making that up. It's just trying to describe an aspect of the mind. So, like, you could legitimately engage with that as a function of the mind, an aspect of the mind, and that sort of thing. So, but the other thing was, to your point of like misspeaking or that sort of thing, it's like, keep in mind, oh, gentle listener, that the nature of this this podcast is, especially our discussions and stuff like that, when it comes to this type of thing, the goal is not to create a video essay. So, like, for instance, there was somebody who was criticizing a couple of pronunciations and misspeakings on one episode back in the fall. I think it was where we were talking about VVVVV, and I think you might have said VVV in quick passing by accident.
I always say Vivera Universum Vivus Victi.
It's actually Viki,
and so that's
one of the things
might be what they were saying. Yeah,
as well. And but it was like, a couple little misspeaks and mispronunciations, but it's like, fine, I understand totally, because I go up the wall when I'm listening to people mispronounce things or say things wrong or whatever. But it's like, it happens all the time in even video essays. But this is not video essay format anyway. This is extemporaneous, impromptu conversation. So, like, if we misspeak, that's going to happen, and that's the nature of the conversation.
But in that case, I appreciate the correction, because I say Vera Universum Vivus Vice, VK, is it, sorry, say it correctly.
You say Victi, which means is
Victory,
conquered,
yeah.
but it's like Viki or Vici. That would be like,
Yeah.
I have conquered, yeah.
Yeah, Vivere Universum Vivis Vici. I say that all the time because I hate going
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
And so if there's one word that I have said incorrectly probably 12 times this year, it's helpful to have it corrected.
Yeah, fair.
You know? I am also pedantic and don't mind don't mind suffering your pedantry, especially as I'm not the one who checks the comments. So keep them coming.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I have to admit, like, my pet peeve is when people say concerning, the word concerning in the sense of, like, I find this troublesome situation to be very concerning. To me, that just gets under my skin because I feel like it's a misapplication of the word that's just been coming around for the past, 10 years or less. But it's like, if you look back at older stuff, language, it wasn't used that way back in the day. And it seems to be a more recent phenomenon in colloquial speech and that sort of thing. And because of the internet, everybody says it that way now, but it just still gets under my skin. And that's just sort of me being an uptight asshole. So.
Yeah.
But I'm putting it out there because the 16 people across every corner of the world that listens to this podcast, hopefully it'll spread.
Yeah, do better, guys.
Yeah. Okay, anyway. Oh, yeah, and the word that I feel like they're searching for when they say I find that concerning is disconcerting. I feel like they're reaching for... Traditionally, it was people reaching for that and not having the...
What is it that the negative situation concerns? I am interested in understanding more about this concern.
It's like... so if you're saying I find that concerning, it's like I also find it regarding or pertaining to, you know?
Yeah, if the situation is concerning, it must be concerning something. I find the situation around education concerning.
Concerning... and there's like an ellipsis there that I keep hearing that's like... Concerning what? Yeah.
I find the situation regarding education concerning in as far as, it concerns the standardized tests or something.
Yeah. And it's, speaking of standardization, it's so commonly used now that it's in news, stories and stuff like that. They use it in everywhere. But be that as it may. Which is funny, actually, because I can't stop going on about it. It's just like I remember watching some movies from like the 70s where they have like the subtitles that are obviously modern subtitles, and I can tell because they insert that word in that context, and it's like, no, they wouldn't have been around at that time. But
I saw a news headline one time. People are so worried about being libelous that there's some special language they use to avoid libel. And I saw a news headline once that said like, the victim went to hospital after being allegedly shot in the food court. It's like
Wow.
it's saying the victim was shot doesn't implicate anybody except the victim and the bullet.
Maybe they're avid readers of...
They either have a hole in them or they don't.
Yeah.
They weren't allegedly shot.
Yeah.
They were shot.
It took place in the food
when
court.
you begin to allege responsibility.
Yeah. Well, that's another one of those things, right?
Then you can say allegedly.
It's almost like it feels like people picking up on the language but not knowing how to apply it properly. That's the impression it gives. But maybe they're just reading a lot of Robert Anton Wilson.
Allegedly a great occultist.
I actually appreciate his mentality about things, but it's like instead of speaking authoritative, it's like the complaint I had about Donald Laycock, just to tie it back. It's like him saying it couldn't be this because you can sort of see that it would have to be the only cipherment that could be at work is substitution, and it's obviously not substitution. It's like, well, no, that's just demonstrating your lack of imagination. It could be actually, the only thing I can think of would be substitution. And I can't make it out to be substitution. That's just, you've got a hole in your potential understanding of the situation, so you can't see how it could be those things. It appears that it's this way.
If you are writing for other people who are really invested in cipher, and you're writing an inside baseball book about cipher, and you don't want to do like general interest things, like you don't want to like bring everybody up from zero because you're writing for an initiated practitioner, you can say, oh, the only thing it could be is substitution, and immediately everyone will apprehend that. Mm-hmm. But in a work about magic, that is not where not everybody has been studying, code breaking for 100 years. If you want to allege that it's this specific type of cipher and definitely not any of the other ones, you need to do some work to bring the audience up to speed to explain why you think that.
Yeah.
And if you don't, even if you're right, everyone's going to assume you think that for no reason.
Yeah. Your casual listener's just going to take that as an authoritative stance and parrot it.
Sure,
it's like the other thing that I like pointing out is there's the controversy over the Holy Table. The Holy Table was printed in Casaubon, the True and Faithful Relation. It was printed basically copied from the actual table that existed in his day, which has since disappeared or been destroyed or something like that. But that was pretty amazing that we have at least that copy from the original table, the Holy Table. And there was this contention that churned up in some of the Enochian books of the 20th century, claiming that because in the diaries it appears in sort of like the reverse, in sort of flipped over or something like that. In the Latin that D was sort of filling in for in the plans for it. This author, I can't remember if it's Turner or I can't remember who it was, but they basically suggest, again in a fairly authoritative manner, that it must be a printing error from the Casaubon, that it must have the plate must for the image must be flipped, and that makes no goddamn sense, because if you think about the way that those plates would work for printing plates, for printing presses, if you flipped it, all the Enochian would be facing the opposite direction. That's obvious, right?
Right.
They're not. So everything is in proper order. It's just that they're placed differently. And not only that, but we have Enochian script going right around the circumference of the table. If you had the plate flipped, it would be, much more complicated to have everything fall out just in the correct way that it's oriented and all that sort of thing, and still be in reverse order and that sort of thing. So that doesn't account for the discrepancy. And I remember looking into the diaries to find something to satisfy myself with when I was making the Holy Table.
Right.
And I did find something that made sense to me, that it was like, okay, D's getting instructions that the Enochian should go in reverse because it's supposed to be written from right to left, like Hebrew. And so like I satisfied myself, but I'm not really great at, when I was going through all the building of the temple equipment and stuff, keeping notes of everything I was doing and the reasoning behind it. So it's like I can't look back, and now I'd have to go back and rebuild that again retroactively. So it's like, that's one of the overwhelming things about that. But basically, that's one of those things that gets parroted over as well because of people speaking authoritatively on it. I think Lon Milo Duquette also parroted that claim that you should actually have it flipped. And so, like, maybe he's right and I'm wrong, but it's like there's others out there as well that have addressed the same subject and recognized that, no, it couldn't be a printer's error, and that's just introducing complications that are not necessary to the problem.
Okay. All right.
But yeah, and even like the idea that Enochian goes right to left like Hebrew. There was a Terry Burns. She does like some really amazing work with like postings on YouTube and stuff like that. But she also sort of suggested that Enochian going right to left like Hebrew is also spurious because it's like in certain situations it might, but that doesn't mean that it always does. Like, in the watchtowers, it can go up and down and left to right, right to left. It can go in swirls, this different kind of thing.
Yeah, that's right. The watchtowers are decoded in a specific way. There are languages that don't have a standardization for this. Like
that's
I think there's I think maybe Mandarin. In English is either left to right or top to bottom, but Mandarin can be bottom to top, right to left. Like, you can, the symbols just go in a way that's aesthetically pleasing or that like fits on the sign you're trying to write.
And Greek, like original Greek used to go like, one direction and then the next line would go the opposite direction. So you'd constantly be, moving. I guess originally the idea being that way your eye can follow more smoothly without having to leap over to the other side of the page or whatever the thing is that you're reading. But yeah, and I mean, with Enochian though, we have, or Angelical, we have specifically in the diaries where they first start trying to write Liber Loga, or other places where they're writing the Enochian alphabet, or a passage in Enochian in the Enochian script, they always write it as Hebrew, right to left.
Kant says space and time are faculties of the observer and not things that exist in the real world. Like you get exposed to these things in themselves, and then using your faculty of space and time begin to interpret them in various ways. And so like the idea of angels who don't, under normal circumstances, don't appeal to our faculties at all, would care about the spatial relationship of their ordering of the letters is very strange.
Yeah, but it's definitely there though, because they also, in fact, with Liber Loga, they specifically direct that the book itself begin with what we would, as they phrase, what you would call the last page will be the first page. So it's basically you're doing it in reverse order, a Hebrew book would be as well. So
but that one imagines that's to capture something that would be abstract to us.
Yeah,
they see the shapes that we see, and it just to them obviously looks like it should be this way, but like, there's a fourth or fifth dimensional axis that we have no access to that demands this kind of arrangement or something.
Yeah.
Like the spiral name of the king at the center of the tablet or something like that. Do you want to move on, or is there more mail that seems like it would be helpful?
Would you like to hit it a little bit more, or do you want to just move it along?
Well, is there someone else who said something especially
offensive?
Yeah.
Well, you know what? Let's just read this one. It's not offensive or anything, but it's like, I have always wondered if anyone had made the Wake world into a short movie or a comics or something. There is this Cancer sun feeling to it. This Cancer is in this zodiacal sign, of course. Not.
Yeah, of course.
And this idea of regaining the womb of creation to see things from a simple viewpoint, devoid of overthinking. 69, which is the Cancer sign looks like a 69,
right.
And Abrahadabra, which enumerates to 418, which is Cheth spelt in full, and that's the connection to, because the letter Cheth is attributed to the chariot, which is Cancer.
Okay.
Both Cancer-related, fit very neatly to the overall feeling one gets when absorbing the images evoked instead of analyzing them. So absorbing them instead of analyzing them. I have had the experience of contemplating all the knowledge I had accumulated over the years on the topic of tarot and ecstatic Kabbalah, unveil and emerge, and being deeply embodied in my soul from God, knows where, while being immersed in contemplation of the wake world, much like that could happen during holy season ritualized lectures. It's a little bit tricky with the grammar. I'm not sure how to suss that out 100%, so apologies on that. It even made me produce my Tree of Life climbing fairy tale, a practice I would recommend to anyone. For it really unlocked something new and powerful, a productive and fertile deepening of my personal relation to the angel. 93s.
Certainly being able to take the Kabbalistic symbols and do something creative with them is a helpful way to integrate them, right? And especially if you've done lots of what they call sometimes path working, where you isolate different Tree of Life experiences, then it can be a good reason to review your diaries, to go and try to create a coherent symbol set that makes a fable like that. Again, I find Wake World to be a little bit next thing, with not enough meaningful consequence. Of course, the relationship with the angel provides a certain kind of a through line, but I don't know how valuable it is as a piece of literature. But certainly as as a communication for occult symbols and a way to digest your own understanding of occult symbols. Doing that as a creative exercise seems to me like it could be a really good idea.
Yeah, it's a good way just to go over the same territory and continue to get something out of it instead of just reading over boring item lists and stuff like that.
I think the idea of like simplifying your point of perspective, I don't know if that's Cancer Sun. Maybe it is, but this process of initiation really is universal. Like people in occultism tend to emphasize the individual nature of it, and Crowley, famously telling students to cut their own way through the jungle and, discover truths for themselves. I think there's a misunderstanding that the truth you discover will be different. That you somehow have your own truth that will be and your own model of reality, that you'll create your own Kabbalah. You do create your own Kabbalah, but it's the same as every other Kabbalah. You just kind of discover what's real as you go along. Yeah. It's like chemists create their own chemistry by going through an education in chemistry and seeing that, when you mix acids and bases, you get water, salt, and some different kind of gas, and the gas varies and the salt may vary, but the water is water, and this is just so you discover these things and build your own model of chemistry, but because of the nature of chemistry, it's the same as every other model of chemistry. It just happens to be yours because you've done the work and gone through the initiatory process. Occultism, I think, should be largely the same, as you're cutting your own way through the jungle, you're cutting your way, the path may be slightly different, but the discoveries you make will be the correct discoveries or not. It's not the case that there are, dozens of different perspectives on truth that are all true. It's like there's the truth is specific, right?
Yeah, in other words, it's sort of like to cut your own way through the jungle enables you to come to the truth rather than just sort of being blinded by the concept of somebody else's truth or something like that. So it's not that you're going to be a distinct truth from every other truth or something like that. It's like that cutting through the jungle does enable you to not be bound up by dogmas and that sort of thing.
The fact that ideas come from a place of deep mind that is opaque to us, that we can't understand, that is mysterious, right? And that these ideas filter down into our consciousness from some mysterious other place that, and that maybe what we want to think of as us is way up there in the fog, unknowable, unseeable. David Lynch can be very scared of that and call it Judy, and Crowley can think it's romantic and call it Babylon. But and even there can be horrible things about Babylon, but you either fall in love with it or you don't, but those are imaginations. When you're doing the real work, the truth that you find in the abyss or hopefully on the other side, Kenneth Grant can confuse the Demon Sea and Babylon and think there may be twins who work together rather than adversaries, and he can just be wrong about that. Karanzan, there's something about it that's evil, and that's the thing we call Karanzan. And if you want to use a different name, that doesn't mean there isn't something about it that's evil. You're just applying the usual technical term in an idiosyncratic way, but there's that scary force is still a part of it. And so that when people have meditative experiences and they go oh man, it's all just one thing and it's harmonious and there's the world really is peaceful and perfect and we all get along. It's just objectively not true. Yeah. So it's not the case that the simplification of perspective is something special for people with their sun sign in Cancer. That's the process of initiation. And maybe it's an easier thing for people with their sun sign in Cancer to grasp. But as you work up the tree, everyone is going to come to similar kinds of realizations if they're actually doing it.
Yeah, and I think I may, like, this is another one of those cases where the comment may have been the type we were talking about earlier, where we now lack the entire context for it.
Yeah, I might have said something.
Yeah, I mean, it's like one of those things, because I think in discussing it, I'm thinking of during the Wake World recording, I think I made comment connecting the idea to what we were talking about with the Liber 418, Aethers 9 and 4. It was like the idea that like there's reference made to a previous Aether where there's the different tiers of adepts, and each tier sees God as a different form. So there's the first tier sees God in the form of a man, but it's actually Baphomet that's above the altar, or Pan. Or, the same thing. But yeah, it's like basically the first tier sees it as a man, the next tier sees it as a goat. I forget the exact order, but it's like basically we get to the tier of the crab and the tier of I forget what the other one was, but there's reference made to that either from the, like in the notes from, I think, Aether 9. And I think I was relating that to what we were seeing in the layout of the tree as portrayed in the Wake World. So it was probably why they were bringing, if I'm remembering that correctly to that extent, it was probably what they're sort of referring to there. And that was Ivan Rustum. Apologies if I don't have that right, but it's all one word. 3674.
Thanks, Ivan.
Yeah. So it may have been the lack of context again. Just FYI.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Otherwise, great comment. I just it's fun.
And
it's fun to nuance these things.
Yeah,
right?
it's a springboard for us to be able to discuss things as well. So if don't take it as a personal one way or the other kind of thing. Anyway, but.
So we're back into the weeds again, talking about initiation as we've been the whole season. What if we simplify this concept? You've participated in a lot of initiation rituals over your, occult career, and you've been initiated several times into different groups. I work as an initiator in a group that sort of has like some, I don't want to say like maybe like some sort of like Golden Dawn claim like tangentially. So I've done lots of initiating as well. What is it? What are we doing? Like in simplest terms, we're taking someone who's not a member of the group and making them a member of the group so that they're allowed to come and hang out with us and do the work we're all doing. But for that, you just need to pay your dues and stamp your card and get all the rules and stuff. Read the employee handbook. What is the value of the ritual?
Actually, even that's actually a good question, and the way that you parsed it with that. Initial description as we're initiating you into the group, so now you can be accepted into the group. I feel like that's the danger potentially of the so-called mission statement. Like one of the things I noticed early on when I first got involved with groups is the mission statement of the group can have massive coloring on the motives of the group, the actions of the group, the attitudes of members of the group, and that sort of thing. And they may not have anything to do with what the intentions were that were set out for the group and that sort of thing. So, parsing it that way, we're making it so that we can add you into the group. We can bring you into the group, and you can be a part of it and that sort of thing. Just that colors things in such a way that can take you off road. You know what I mean? It's like, to me, this is all speculative because it's all personal opinion and that sort of thing. So keep in mind, I'm not speaking on behalf of any group or, that sort of thing. To me, the purpose of initiation, it does involve a group because there's we can think of it in terms of, traditional initiations into adulthood from tribes or, groups in that respect, where it's like putting them through the trial so that they can become a man or a woman and become part of a fully functioning adult within the tribe and that sort of thing. And it becomes a critical experience that usually involves death or the threat of death and coming face to face with that threat and that reality, not just that threat, but that reality, that actual undergoing that experience to what extent you can. So death always seems to be, undergoing a death seems to be tied to initiation. I'm going to throw out there, at least for the moment, that I would say that initiation is creating a crisis, creating basically knocking things out of whack, so that you can now. If we look at the Golden Dawn system, it appears to be essentially breaking up the initial first matter, and that way you can begin to refine different aspects of the first matter in quote-unquote isolation to some extent, or one extent or another. And then that way, by the time we've gone through each of the four elements, we can bring them all together again in a refined state, and so that they also have a velocity in a particular direction and that sort of thing.
I was reading the excerpting a little bit the Egyptian Book of the Dead, which it's much clearer in Crowley's Pyramidos than it is in the Golden Dawn initiations, but the template is kind of the same. Crowley's Pyramidos very, very closely mimics what's going on in the Golden Dawn system. So when you see the Egyptian Book of the Dead in the Pyramidos ritual, then you can also start to see it in the Golden Dawn initiation systems, and that is about traveling through the underworld, purifying your soul, making sure you've done all the right work so that you can get to the duat and have a more comfortable afterlife than you otherwise would. Perhaps have an afterlife at all. You know, you don't want to be eaten by that crocodile thing or whatever. And so I think one of the things that initiation does is, like, it, or the reason aspirants might traditionally seek initiation in the rites of Eleusis, or in the rites of Mithras, or in the rites of, Isis or something. Shout out to Blue Fawn, who is a relatively new YouTube creator who has a whole series now of about Roman initiatory cults, which is worth looking at for any Thelemites. Blue Fawn on YouTube. There's one called Why We Don't Understand Mithras at All, which is a provocative enough title that maybe will pique your interest. But so I think people went through these initiations traditionally because they were concerned about their immortal soul and whether or not they have one. And that maybe you didn't have an immortal soul, but then by going through an initiation, your soul became immortal. Or like maybe usually you'd go to Hades and just like wander with the shades. But if you had been through the mysteries of Eleusis, which had something to do with, Persephone and Demeter and Hades and that whole story, that afterlife would seem more encouraging. And so this is difficult in a world where most people start out as what are called naive rationalists. That's not I've said before, every time I say that, I feel like I'm putting you down. Not you, but humans. Naivete doesn't mean like stupidity. It means that we trust what we see and hear and think and don't, and begin as materialists, and so I think most people who go through initiation are not at all concerned about the quality of their immortal soul. And what do we have to give them if they either A, think just accepting Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior is enough to, get, to solve the afterlife problem. I don't need to do anything else.
So Jesus is the that crocodile that'll.
Jesus is the crocodile.
The more friendly,
or
crocodile.
More likely that they don't believe they have souls at all. Like, what is the new purpose of initiation in a Thelemic context, where like Crowley doesn't write very much about what happens after death. It's not his primary concern. So,
and when he does, he emphasizes that it's speculation on his part to one extent or another. So,
and Crowley makes a distinction between these ritual initiations and then the integration of initiation, which is the actual initiation where you go through the ritual and it kicks something off, but you don't really have the grade until you have this experience that's associated with it, that something about it has changed your perspective on the world you're in. We've both met people who are into yoga and meditation and health crazes and stuff like that, and they have maybe had some of these transcendent experiences, but they have no symbol set, no framework at all for how to integrate them. So they say a lot of stuff that doesn't make any sense. And this seems too so part of initiation is to encourage you to do the work maybe, but also to give you a symbol set for what happens to you when you succeed in the work, and so that there's a perspective that so your mind doesn't get totally blown, or maybe it does get blown, but then you have a way of talking about it. Is that good enough? I don't think it's good enough. What do you think?
I mean, that's the tricky thing about it is people from the outset don't have necessarily a clear idea of what they're getting into, and I think that's just to be expected. It's not like somebody who comes to initiation should necessarily have a clear idea of what to expect, because that's the nature of it. Like you say, it's you can expect to be changed by it, and therefore your goals, your expectations, your entire outlook on the universe, you can expect those things to change, but most people don't. Most people get into something because they've decided what they like, and they want to reinforce those ideas. So in the case of that yoga sort of perspective, people like the ideas that are on the surface of it. They want to steep themselves and get involved in that. And so with yoga, with Buddhism, with these different paths, you'll get things that will change your perspective. You'll get critical changes to your outlook on things and that sort of thing if you're doing it right. But same thing here. It's specifically a big part of it is you aren't going to know from the outset what you think you do. Very often you think you do. But on closer inspection, it's the reality is you don't really know what you're in for. And there's going to be the whole idea is that going through it is part of the changing process.
Very often when people are coming into initiation and they're interviewing for hey, I want to be part of this group or whatever, what they say is that oh, I want to be around like-minded people. I want a certain amount of mentorship. I want access to the curriculum. I need, there's so much occult material. I need to know what work to do at what stage of my process. So I want to come in and just have guidance.
So it's essentially a filtration system.
And I used to say that was kind of the wrong reason to come in. The reason to join a secret society is that you want the secrets. And I was imagining the OTO model where there actually was a supreme secret that was maybe worth having, right? But in things like Masonry and various other of these groups, the secrets are just the things that are called the secrets of the degree are just the words and handshakes, and they don't have that same sort of, it's not an occult technique. They don't have that same significance. And then what you were saying about the idea of joining a group, being, I join a group because I want to join a group, and then that colors my perspective. Too many people who are adepts, it's oh, well, what is it? This is something that my teacher used to say is the goal of the OTO is to preserve the secret of sexual magic, but the goal of the AA, of the Golden Dawn, of some of these various other initiate orders is to make adepts. And adept is a cool word. It sounds like you know how to do lots of stuff in the real world, or know how to do lots of occult techniques. But then by speaking with some adepts, it became clear that that at least some of what they meant by adepthood was being adept at applying the system.
Yeah.
So you go through all these rituals and you learn them, and you will learn all the nuance of the ritual gestures, and then hopefully something happens to you internally. But what it really means to be adept is to be like a person who can then show up and run these rituals.
Yeah.
And so it does begin to seem like just a self-perpetuating machine that doesn't, like a Rube Goldberg machine, like it just keeps going, but it doesn't like do anything.
Yeah.
And so I think what I want to advocate for is the idea that even if we don't believe we have immortal souls necessarily, at least coming in, we can be concerned. We can still be concerned about the character of our souls, and about in the same way philosophers are, right? Like my favorite podcast, The Partially Examined Life, which is a joke on Aristotle's quip that an unexamined life is not worth living. So they have, because they're not actually doing philosophy professionally, they maybe fell short of their PhD or decided not to go into academia, so they have only partially examined lives. That part of what initiation encourages, and not just initiation, but the curriculum that you maybe get after and the daily work that you do, encourages some of that kind of examination, which even if it doesn't go towards flourishing in the usual sense, doesn't go towards like health, wealth, and prosperity or whatever your framework of flourishing would be, it gives you a vehicle for examination of life. And some people that I've spoken to call this self-knowledge, which I don't think is correct. I don't think it's navel-gazing. I don't have very much care about self. It's more like examination of life in the abstract and the conditions in which we exist and our relationships to them.
Yeah, and I think the biggest difficulty with that is that when you gain a deeper perspective, when you get to the other side of this process, I mean, even that's kind of like maybe not correct, because it's almost like an ongoing process in a lot of ways. But it's like once you get to a certain stage where you have this different perspective, this different way of interacting with your environment, then you have a better understanding of things, and it's easier to kind of apply things in a different way. Whereas when you're coming at it from the outset, it's like basically it seems like it's impossible to convey what you're in for, what you're doing it for, to a great extent. It's kind of like you have to speak the language of the profane, meaning like when you're outside of the temple, which is what profane basically means. When you're before the temple, you speak in the language before the temple. When you're in the antechamber, you speak in the language of the antechamber. As you work your way towards the Holy of the Holies, you speak with increasingly refined language to the subject at hand.
Maybe it's easier to parse it if we think of like a more Gnostic worldview, where the world is kind of a perdition, created by a false god who just wants you to enjoy the things of sense and rapture and not, well, sense but not rapture. Just be here and not progress upwards, because if you progress upwards, then they're afraid that they won't have jobs to do, as in the Pistis Sophia. Their job is to administer a specific aeon, and if souls progress upwards, then maybe there's fewer souls available to be administered in that aeon, and their kingdom shrinks. So the world is like a vehicle for achieving a kind of homeostasis where progress doesn't happen. And so in this worldview, you don't have access to spirits, and you have a naive rationalist perspective because the world you live in doesn't have spirits. And you can start trying to do magic on your own and build that kind of spirits contact, and that works. But I guess the hope is that through initiation, you meet other people who have genuine spirit contact, and they can introduce you. And even if they're carrying scripts, and even if they're mumbling, and even if they're not the best actors, and even if they're like equipment seems homemade and hokey, that on a spiritual level, once those patterns are in place, and they've been in place for a couple of 100 years, the angels recognize the movement, and then your magic becomes more effective because you've touched genuine spirit contact. The people who were there, the initiator, hopefully, my job is to make that spirit contact and then clumsily try to communicate some of it to the candidate, so that even if the candidate doesn't have an immortal soul, there are, immortal souls that become aware of the candidate.
Yeah, it puts me in mind of, and again, I'm going to put this, emphasize this as a speculative kind of frame of approach here. So that's like I'm picturing a lot of experiences that I had at various points throughout my life where there was like communication going on. It's one of those things like where you're seeing synchronicities pop up and signs and, numbers and, this, that, and the other that could just as easily be a completely crazy person type of stuff, and often is. But it's like the trying to pick up the signal in all the noise. So you get the noise of all of life around you, and there seems to be these signals that come through, and the pattern seems to be undeniable. In some cases, it really, you can kind of distinguish. It feels like, okay, this definitely does feel like this is actually something. And then you can end up copying and pasting that over to other experiences and be like, I think I'm getting it again, but it's like maybe that's not actually the case, because all the noise, you can see faces in the static in the TV screen back in the 1980s, not now because it doesn't exist anymore. But it's like, so it's kind of like that's what we do. We find shapes and patterns in the images and stuff, but it's like with that in mind, using all the patterns and things, using the way of framing things in our own minds, using the focus, using refined focus as a means of trying to capitalize on that thing that's trying to come through.
I think it's called An Open Letter to Those Who Wish to Join the Order, or maybe it's the one that is called The Account of the Order, but it's the document that's supposed to introduce the idea of secret chiefs.
Yeah.
And that there's a body of light that is controlling everything, that always has been controlling everything. And why would you need to reach out to it if it's already controlling everything? Well, because we live in a Gnostic world where controlling everything doesn't mean, God is not all powerful, right?
Yeah, well, if you picture us operating the way you were describing it, it sort of sounds like sort of the realm of hungry ghosts.
Yeah, exactly. And so the order either operates by dispensation of the secret chiefs, or it doesn't. And this is what Crowley means when he says the Golden Dawn failed to initiate, because they didn't have a track record of really communicating. There were people there going through the motions, but they didn't have that genuine, what it's called, third order contact that would allow them to communicate and really. It's like, hey, I want to introduce you to Jeff Bezos because, I think you got skills and you could maybe get a job at, what fucking company does Bezos run? I don't remember. But like, then it's a cardboard cutout of Jeff Bezos.
Yeah.
Like that's the difference. Is you either have it or you don't. Like you're in contact or not. Yeah. And you can choose not to believe that that's not true and be interested in occultism for other reasons. But I think that has to be the theory, is that, you're being touched or not being touched.
Yeah, so you're basically, you're right about describing it as a sort of self-perpetuating machine. And it does operate like that, but it's like whether or not it's, keeping that connection is a very important aspect to it, which is very difficult for somebody who's before the temple to, have... You kind of just have to
evaluate it.
You can't evaluate. You just gotta have to make your best judgment and then take action.
But this is why warrants can be important, because it shows the lineage back to someone you trust. like because of Crowley's writing, we can suspect that his spirit contact was genuine.
Yeah.
And it's going to get worse, not better, as time progresses. Every generation you are removed from the source, you're getting a weaker and weaker contact. It's not like a science where you build on your predecessors, you lose it as time goes by until you meet someone else who has that deep degree of initiation and can re-spark the fire and progress it.
Yeah.
Anyway, maybe people know that already, but I thought that like the way we've been talking about initiation and also this neat realization that the HGA crisis was also a death and resurrection. That like all initiation is always a death and resurrection. So we're one, rehearsing for death, two, concerned about the character of our souls, about, what afterlife will be like. And then three, like making that spirit contact. And even though it's one of the first things you're told, if you read the, account of the order or the open letter, I don't think at that stage in your career you believe it. It just seems like mythology to you.
Yeah.
And so to just reinforce that that's like really what we think is happening.
Yeah.
If you're coming to at least, and I'm not going to tell you how, so don't, so you can't. But if you came to me for initiation, that's what I would imagine I was doing. So take it or take that with a grain of salt. There's one more thing I kind of wanted to talk about today. And we are running pretty long for a check-in episode, so I don't know how you feel about it. But a couple of weeks ago, someone in a position of authority was on a podcast and doing pretty well, talking at a beginner level about Thelema. I thought it was going great. And then the question of Crowley as a controversial figure came up. And the person said, like, look, if you hear anything negative about Crowley, it's probably just one, a rumor, and two, something somebody made up. Like, it's probably, you can probably just write it off because a lot of these rumors come from uneducated corners of, or like, maybe
it's gossip kind of thing.
Yeah, or maybe like a Christian is scared of Satanists and heard this thing about Crowley eating babies and just like, maybe it's not true. And like, they just want to say, oh, be scared and be Christian, and at first that kind of pissed me off. Then I realized that was probably true. That like the rumors that are circulating, the things that you hear about Crowley that are problematic probably are nonsense.
Yeah.
Because nobody knows anything about Crowley, present company excluded. And that's been our mission of the podcast, is to talk about the primary sources and give people a way in to think about it more authentically. So I wanted to talk about three things that were actually problematic about Crowley, so that you could be worried about it for good reasons. And so the first thing is, several years ago, somebody put up a shitty listicle, like some like homeless kid put up this meaningless listicle on this website nobody's ever heard of about like 10 cults that are more dangerous than Scientology. And the OTO was on that list. And like, who gives a shit? Like, anyone on the internet can write literally anything. It's just some fucking jerk off jerking off, and I thought it was like funny, And I shared it on my Facebook page at the time because hey, look, we made the news, but like it's just somebody's goddamn Tumblr account. Anyway, the OTO mobilized their lawyers and had their article removed.
Oh, really?
So the list that used to go from 1 to 10 now went from 1 to 5,
I guess
and then
they
from
are
7
pretty
to
dangerous.
10. Yeah, and so the main thing he said was that Crowley was a Satanist, and the OTO's position was that Crowley was not a Satanist, and that accusations of Satanism are like a profound misunderstanding of the doctrine. And so the first thing I want to talk about, this is the lightest material we'll cover today. Things are going to get dark real quick. This is Crowley talking about the effect of his father's death on his psychology. He loved his dad so much, and he was a sincere Plymouth Brethren student, I mean, as sincere as any 10-year-old is when they admire their dad and just wants to do whatever their dad does. It's impossible to suppose that the character of the school had completely changed between my father's death and my returning from the funeral. He's having a bad experience at school. He loved it before, and now his father's dead. He doesn't like school. Yet before that, I was completely happy and in sympathy with my surroundings. Not 3 weeks later, Ishmael was my middle name. I cannot account for it at all satisfactorily. I had been perfectly genuine in my ambition to lead a life of holiness. The idea of intimate communion with Jesus was constantly present in my mind. I do not remember any steps in the Voltaire farce. I asked one of the masters one day how it was that Jesus was 3 days and 3 nights in the grave, although crucified on a Friday and rising again Sunday morning. He could not explain it and said that it had never been explained. So I formulated my ambition to become the shining light in Christianity by doing this thing that had never yet been done. The idea, by the way, is very characteristic. I am totally unable to take any interest in doing anything which has been done before. But tell me of an alleged impossibility, and health, wealth, and life itself are nothing. I am out to do it. The apparent discrepancy in my gospel narrative aroused no doubt in my mind as to the literal truth of either of the texts. Indeed, my falling away from grace was not occasioned by any intellectual qualms. I accepted the theology of the Plymouth Brethren. In fact, I could hardly conceive of the existence of any people who might doubt it. I simply went over to Satan's side, and to this hour I cannot tell why. But I found myself as passionately eager to serve my new master as I had been to serve the old. I was anxious to distinguish myself by committing sin, and here again my attitude was extraordinarily subtle. It never occurred to me to steal or in any other way infringe upon the Decalogue. Such conduct would have been petty and contemptible. I wanted supreme spiritual sin. I had not the smallest idea of how to set about it. And he goes on. So his radical Christian faith, his dad, he wants to do this thing that's never been done in Christianity, and then his dad dies, and then now he's mad at God, and now still not like a Levée Satanist, not like cosplaying Satanism as a political, atheist criticizing the church, but like he believes in God and he believes in Jesus with his whole heart and dedicates himself to Satan and wants to be as extraordinary in sin as he used to want to be in faith. And so if you say Crowley was a Satanist, it's non-specific, like all you have to do, like I can say I was a Satanist. I'm not dead.
It doesn't the spirit that transmitted the book.
I can say like I said of my teacher, right? He was a Satanist. Now he's dead. He was a Satanist. Then he was a Thelemite. It doesn't mean Satan penetrated his entire life.
Crowley did believe that, or say that goetic spirits are parts of the brain. At one time.
Yeah, it doesn't mean he always had a psychological view of magic. But so to just say the fact, so that this can become actionable. Like, you come down and you're like, okay, so this is libelous. You need to take it down. You said Crowley was a Satanist and he wasn't. Well, I didn't say Crowley was always a Satanist and he was a Satanist. Now, you can say this was just like grief and he's just like dedicating himself to Satan for like a year or two, and it's still a fraudulent characterization of the man and his order, to say that because Crowley was a Satanist for 20 minutes, the whole OTO is a satanic organization. I told you earlier, I was reviewing Liber Samech because I'm trying to learn the ritual again and get it back up on its feet for a little while. And I usually just say the barbarous names out of all context, but now I want to learn what Crowley's interpretation of them is.
Yeah.
Every third barbarous name is in praise of Satan.
Yeah.
As a mature magician, post-Golden Dawn, deep into the AA, working in Kefaloon, like trying to establish an abbey of Thelema in Europe that will be a cultural hub for his new movement, he is teaching people to praise Satan as their holy guardian angel.
Yeah.
And like, oh, you know, like he doesn't mean like Satan in the way you think of Satan. Like he doesn't mean like the transcendent evil force at the heart of the universe. Well, plenty of people who call themselves Satanists don't mean actual Satan.
Yeah, don't mean what you mean by Satan.
Yeah. So you might as well say LaVey was not a Satanist. Like it's explicit satanic worship.
Yeah, not only that, there's also in the Aeon of Mott, which this book that somebody had lent me, it's like the letters between Frater Achad and Gerald York, and I think Kenneth Grant was involved in some of them and stuff like that. It's a really, really good book, and I really got to track it down and get a copy for myself as well because it's an excellent reference. And it's these letters as Gerald York is trying to get as much of the Crowley material from Achad as he can, or the Achad material as well, because it's all historically of importance. And so in this exchange of letters, there's one point where I think Achad is, talking about the subject of his conversion to Catholicism and Crowley's disdain of that. I think Crowley ejected him from the order because of that. There's like this point where I don't know if it's Gerald York or if it's Grant or if it maybe even Carl Germer comes into play at one point. There's like them trying to make the point of like, didn't you realize that during the whole Kefaloo period or somewhere around that time, Crowley was, putting a lot of stock into seeing things from this perspective. It sounded very much like they're trying to argue like, don't you realize that Crowley was seeing things from this satanic perspective? And I don't remember the exact wording and stuff, so it makes it a little bit out of context. It's unfortunately a little bit broken telephone at this point, but Achad did express like, I didn't know anything about that, so Achad didn't have any carryover of that perspective.
Right.
However, there's people referencing it as something above and beyond just a reference to his childhood and that sort of thing.
And we've noticed this before. Like if Crowley thinks he's a Gnostic, he's read the Pistis Sophia. He knows what it means to be a lion-faced power.
Yeah.
He's recommended his students read the Pistis Sophia. Like there's the God above God. There's the one true God. And then there's Jesus, who brings you from the real world into the grace of the one true God. And then there's this evil monster that controls the universe, who is called the lion-faced power, who is the lion serpent, who is at least once in the Pistis Sophia called Yaldabaoth, and the Gnostic Mass, like his most important public ritual, O lion and O serpent, that destroy the destroyer, be mighty among us. O lion and O serpent, that destroy the destroyer, be mighty among us. It's specifically not just in praise of Satan as like, as a Lucifer figure, as like a trespass figure, as like, this person who really cares about humanity betrayed God to bring us fire. No, it's the evil thing that made the world that we are trying to transcend. We begin with praise of the most immediate God, who is the villain of the whole piece.
Yeah. And I mean, I can't help it, but it does, I don't want this to sound like I'm just trying to whitewash it, but it smacks of the Satan of Job, which is the adversary. It's the accuser, but more... What's the term for that? Basically the adversary, I'll just go with that. But I'm trying to think of like the prosecutor or whatever, that sort of thing. So it's like a legal kind of position to be arguing to this other side of things. Yeah. But at the same time, I also, when I was reading through those letters and that sort of thing, I was playing with the possibility that maybe the letters AA were the A's in Satan.
Oh, yeah. The next thing is this. So Crowley's a racist, and people don't like racists. And the usual line on this is, well, he was a man of his time. We can't judge people 100 years ago by the standards we might have for them today. He's a member of a British colonial power. He's we can expect people writing at that time to be racist. A certain amount of that is true. There was a wonderful article collecting just all of Crowley's controversial quotes and just saying like, this dude was a bad dude. I should have brought it in so I could say the name of the author and stuff. Very good article. And like one of the things in there is like how he says that like Hindus look ridiculous in European clothing. And you can say like, okay, well, that's just what we mean by colonialism. Yeah. Like they only wear European clothing because we invaded, and and now you're diluting this culture that used to be special and like turning it into just greater Europe. Like so there's things that he says about it that are like you can do an apologetics for, and one of the coolest things in Magick Without Tears is where he says like basically without saying it how important it is to be racist. Basically any group, when taken as a group, has more defects than qualities. And when you put a man with great qualities in with a group, he immediately falls below the worst defect of the worst one. And so this is like a defense of, I'm saying racism, but like of sociology. You have to be able to generalize about groups. And because groups are terrible, those generalizations will often be negative. Yeah. And so like, what Crowley meant by race is any discrete group of people. Like he would say like the race of women who goes to women's clubs, which is like one of the examples in that excerpt that I'm trying to remember. Or he would say like the Irish race, or the aristocratic race. He just means subset of humanity. After World War II, when we wanted some way to like talk, we wanted as many ways as possible to talk about how the Holocaust was bad. It was decided that there were 5 races. There was black, white, yellow, brown, and red. And they were called things, the yellow people were called something like Mongoloid, and the black people were called something like Negroid, and white people were called Caucasoid. And that was true all the way up into like 2001 when I was at university. I was taught this theory of race. And the reason to have 5 races is that then you can say Judaism is not a race, Judaism is a religion. So not only were the Nazis wrong in being racist, but they were also wrong about the whole concept of what a race is at all. And since I went to university, it's now considered that the race in the way we talked about it then doesn't even exist. Like there's one human race. And now we do sociology by thinking about discrete ethnic groups, which is just what Crowley meant by race. It's just, yeah. So we're back to square one. And so like, okay, maybe Crowley's just a man of his time and his racism is not more problematic than the racism of any other person. And, we know he wrote for a German magazine during World War I, but it was World War I and not World War II. And let's just pretend he was fucking spying or something made up. Let's just lie about the fact that the hypothesis that he was spying. So this is from the introduction to Book 4, Part 1 on yoga. The history of Christianity shows precisely the same remarkable fact. Jesus Christ was brought up on the fables of the Old Testament and was compelled to ascribe to his experience to Jehovah, although his gentle spirit could have nothing to do with the common monster who was always commanding the rape of virgins, the murder of little children, and whose rites were then, and still are, celebrated by human sacrifice. This is what Gnosticism is, in part. Anti-Semitic, like explicit anti-Semitism. Christianity has broken away from Judaism. It will never be a mainstream Jewish sect. It's its own new religion. Say we're 100, 200 years after the death of Jesus. So now the Christians have to distinguish themselves from Jews, and so the Christians just hate Jews. And so Yaldabaoth is the god of the Old Testament. That's their word for Zabaoth or Jehovah. And so like Gnosticism is specifically about hating Jews and saying that their God is a liar and a crook. And Crowley here is echoing that sentiment. In the footnote here he says, "The massacres of Jews in Eastern Europe, which surprise the ignorant, are almost invariably excited by the disappearance of Christian children stolen as parents suppose for the purpose of ritual murder." Now here's like maybe some plausible deniability because he says stolen as parents suppose. So he's not reinforcing the blood libel, which is this idea that Jews kill and eat Christian children. He's just saying that people in Eastern Europe believe in the blood libel, and so whenever a Christian child dies, there's that creates a movement, a popular movement of Christians who will then lynch a whole bunch of Jews.
Yeah, yeah.
And because they blame the Jewish population for the child's death. And some of what he says in the main body of the text, not in this footnote, is also true. Because we've talked about this before, how there are places in the Old Testament where it looks like God is commanding child sacrifice, or where it looks like, or where the Jews are like saying like, oh man, these Canaanites are so evil. Like we got to go to war with these Canaanites. And like the things about the golden calf and stuff. It's like early Jewish writing that specifically seems to be forbidding child sacrifice. And you wouldn't go out of your way to like say, stop doing child sacrifice if no one was doing child sacrifice. It seems like the advent of the type of writing that we have goes along with the end of maybe a period of child sacrifice to the degree where in our earliest, and it's not a Jewish problem, it's a human problem. Like we stop doing child sacrifice and then we start doing writing. And we start doing writing soon enough after we start doing child sacrifice that you can still see in those stories written down people talking about how child sacrifice is inappropriate. Like there's enough of a memory.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the Carthaginians were accused by the Romans of doing child sacrifices.
And we have the skulls.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why, that's like still concurrent with, the first few hundred years of just before zero.
So again, here, maybe there's an apologia we can do that we can say like, oh, Crowley isn't reinforcing the blood libel. Crowley is just talking about the fact that people in Europe believe in the blood libel. This is from the preliminary remarks ahead of Liber 777, all right? Another line or argument is the historical. We do not here refer to the alleged forgery of the Kabbalah by Rabbi Moses ben Leon, was it not, but to the general position of the ethnologists that the Jews were an entirely barbarous race incapable of any spiritual pursuit. That they were polytheists is clear from the very first verse of Genesis. That's true about the polytheism. Accusations of barbarity are subjective. That Adonai Melcha is identical with Moloch, is known to every Hebraists. Moloch is not the name of a god. Moloch is the name of a type of sacrifice, a burnt offering. And surely it means when you put a children in a brazen bull, and surely children were sacrificed in Moloch to Canaanite gods. And my conspiracy theory about this, my unsubstantiated conspiracy theory, is that the reason the Jews are not Canaanites is that a group of conscientious objectors to the idea of child sacrifice left and became a wandering tribe. That they just that the thing that makes Jews different than the Canaanites, who were first of all, the Old Testament stories pretend that Canaan was an offshoot of Israel. It's actually the other way around. Israel's left Canaan, and I think that maybe one of the reasons they left was because they didn't want their children to be murdered anymore.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The Old Testament is mainly the history of the struggles of phallic Jehovah against the rest of the Elohim, and that his sacrifices were of blood and of human blood. That is indisputable. It's disputable. Human sacrifices are today still practiced by the Jews of Eastern Europe, as is set forth at length by the late Sir Richard Burton in the manuscript, which wealthy Jews of England have compressed heaven and earth to suppress, as evidenced by the ever-recurring pogroms against which so senseless an outcry is made by those who live among the degenerate Jews, who are, at least, not cannibals. So they're killing babies but not eating them. This is like not... This is what Europeans think. This is a direct accusation of like that European, not Jews all over the world, but the specific European Jews still practice the traditional practice of killing and maybe not eating babies as sacrifices to their god. So like this is beyond the pale. This is not like the normal number of amount of racism for a person writing in like 1920. he wrote for a German newspaper because he had German sympathies. And in World War I, not World War II. In World War II, he came down on the English side. He thought Hitler was bad news. But he writes in some of the letters in Magick Without Tears, comparing his Thelema to Hitler's politics and saying, Hitler is right up to this point and then falls short here. He's like, and there are so many historical figures you can point to of that time that are explicitly anti-racist.
Yeah.
That's saying just like, we shouldn't care that people 100 years ago sometimes had bad politics. I don't think we should care to the extent that we stop using his yoga manual and stop caring about what's in the holy books. But you can't write off how extraordinarily bad this is. How reprehensible some of these.
Yeah.
And like intermixing it with things that are historical fact, like humans sometimes did human sacrifice and those humans were sometimes Jewish, it does not allow you to persecute Jews of today for supposed crimes, not even crimes at the time, that were committed 5,000 or 6,000 years ago.
Yeah, not only were they not crimes at the time, they were specifically, you could describe them as laws that you do that, because otherwise, so they're divine laws. But so that's, absolutely. And also, for instance, like some places he'll try to, like the way that he may speak about race, he may sound like he's making it like emphasizing every man and every woman is a star, and like the idea that like race isn't a boundary for being a human being and that sort of thing, being a star. But then he has like all kinds of avid racism and casual racism throughout his writings, including like his fiction writing. There's like usually every once in a while there'll be a black person or a brown person that pops up and is treated very derisively in the text, like made the sort of ridiculous or threatening kind of character that is properly dealt with, so to speak, by being roundly beaten by the white hero or whatever.
Every once in a while, like a really bad person will hear this stuff about Crowley and then also like watch some shitty documentary about occult Nazism and think like, oh man, Crowley hated Jews and Hitler loved occultism. So maybe the OTO is a Nazi organization I can join if I want to do more Nazism. Like, this is awesome. And so like the absolute wrong type of people will show up and try to hang around. So like, you can think about like one of Crowley's students and was this woman named Martha Kunzel, who loved Crowley as much as she loved Hitler. There were these two people in her life who were like her guiding lights and stars. Yeah. And she saw them and was like taken by their charisma. And so she was like a dedicated member of the Nazi Party, worked hard for the Nazi regime, but was also Crowley's main translator into German, popularizing the Book of the Law. Hitler never had the Book of the Law, but Martha Kunzel and Crowley worked together to start that rumor that that he was inspired by Crowley. And is it Victor Newberg was put in a concentration camp
Carl Germer.
Sorry, thank you. Carl Germer was put in Victor Newberg was a Jew, so he would have been concentrated for a different reason. But Carl Germer was put in a concentration camp for being a Mason, and Martha Kunzel was imprisoned and kicked out of the Nazi Party for being associated with an occultist. So while being a Nazi doesn't necessarily preclude you from membership in any Thelemic group, being a member of the Thelemic group precludes you from membership in the Nazi Party. So if you care about being a racist shithead more than you care about Thelema, like, just fuck off. Don't come here because the other guys will not accept you. So this is not an advertisement to people who might be interested in more racism and these are supposed to be bad things about Crowley, not things that recommend.
Yeah, exactly. And we've seen like some of the thread of Crowley's, again, in that period of time, like in the late Victorian era into this period, right up until World War II, there was a lot of interest in some of the ideas pertaining to like eugenics and that sort of thing. And Crowley was on board for a lot of those ideas.
I mean, my apologetics for this is just anyone who's ever had a purebred dog is a eugenicist.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, you know, if you want really tall basketball players, you need to start interbreeding really tall basketball players, and like, you know, there might be a way of breeding for really cool, strong Olympians, you know, or like really super smart science people. This has its own sort of world of ethical issues, big can of worms to open to talk about like treating children like living human children as a science project. That's its own kind of problem. But it is distinct from the problem that people talk about now where, oh, you know, anyone born with Down syndrome was forcibly sterilized before they even left the hospital. Or people in Native communities, you know, being forced, if they couldn't put a father's name on the birth certificate, their tubes were tied before they left the hospital so that they couldn't, you know, that their first kid would be their only kid. Like, this also falls under the umbrella of eugenics, but I think is not usually what eugenicists are talking about. This is like these are like obviously crimes against humanity. To just like try to exterminate lesser people. But what eugenicists are usually talking about is controlled breeding programs for human beings in the same way we breed dogs, which is also upsetting.
Well, it's in hindsight, it's fumbling Darwinism. Like we have Darwin coming out in the 1800s and not being gay. Like, I'm not saying that he was
that's what I'm saying.
And he could have been, as far as I know, and that may have been an evolution for him, as far as I know. But like we have the Darwinism sort of idea, and a lot of interesting sorts of ideas that in many ways were clumsy, or I'm not saying Darwinism was clumsy, but a lot of these ways of rationalizing things like criminology. The idea of, like, you know, measuring people's skulls and being able to glean intelligence based on that, and
phrenology.
Phrenology, yeah. So that phrenology, kind of like trying to gauge whether somebody's going to be a criminal or something like that based on their skull shape and that. Basically we have all these ideas, some of which may go most of which probably go nowhere, and then some of which may have ideas that are actually relevant. But the fact of the matter is, what I gain from looking at that is you can notice this all the time. When we think we know what we're talking about, we create systems of understanding and rationalizing things, and those systems eventually have to be called back into question, and you continue to refine, or you start from scratch if you need to, or you amalgamate ideas if you need to, and that sort of thing. But like at certain points in time, like over that period of time, people would have really been on board for certain ideas that just make sense. You can rationalize how eugenics would make sense. You can rationalize how phrenology might make sense, and it's very pleasing to think that you can actually glean. I mean, this astrology falls into the same category, essentially, right? It's our human desire to come up with a system with which to describe things, or be able to anticipate, or even create things, or cause things.
For those who are curious, the reference I made to Hitler in Magic Without Tears earlier, I think the quote is something like, he's talking about his idea of Superman, like what a Thelemic Nietzschean Superman would look like. And he said the idea is very much like Hitler's Herrenvolk.
That's right, yeah.
But except there's no folk about it.
Yeah, yeah.
So for Crowley, even though you can make generalizations based on what he calls race, which is just like ethnic group. And one of those generalizations is that Jews sometimes eat babies. There is no folk that is superior to any other. All folk are bad. What makes you a heron is being an individual, removed from your folkishness. And every person when taken as a person, right? And so this is why he can believe this about European Jews, but still date Victor Newberg, who is a Jew and European. But then if you look at Victor Newberg's diary of his probation, he does his whole probation in 1 week at Kefaloon with Crowley as his guru.
Oh, not at Kefaloon. You mean at
sorry,
Boleskine?
at Boleskine,
Yeah.
with Crowley as his
Boleskine.
guru. And Crowley is complaining that Newberg is lazy. And Newberg writes, I think there's something so ungentlemanly about making fun of a man because of his race. Mm-hmm. So the whole week, Crowley's just calling Newberg a lazy Jew.
Yeah.
You have to read between the lines to get it. But so it's just terrible. And there's no way out of it. It just is. But it doesn't mean the work isn't worth doing.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, it's not an excuse one way or the other. It's kind of like...
it doesn't mean the poetry isn't beautiful. It doesn't mean the system doesn't function the way the system needs to function. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't mean that we shouldn't aspire to be like Crowley in so many other ways. Mm-hmm. Like, you wouldn't say... Crowley was racist, therefore mountain climbing is racist.
Yeah. Some dogs have gotten into my study.
Yeah. Therefore my study is dogs? Was that That's very funny. Did you get that from somewhere? Anyway, Keith 418 once complained privately to me that he felt that one of my teachers was always cribbing his writing without giving him any credit.
Oh, yeah?
That it was just like, I really like this guy. I like his writing, but I always got pissed off because I felt a lot of his articles were just my articles and that he didn't give me any credit for it. So I just want to say that this whole thing about the blood libel,
all of your opinions
was inspired by Keith, inspired by conversations I had with Keith at some point.
Fair enough. And I really like being able to talk frankly about this too, because it's always one of those either or kind of things for people where they're either trying to take Crowley down with these accusations about how horrible he was, or they're trying to defend and whitewash and make it okay, so that it's almost like, so it's okay for me, so to make it okay for you kind of thing. But it's like, no, there's ugliness, and part of being a Thelemite is about having to confront all the ugly stuff you don't want to deal with.
Last thing, Crowley is often accused of having sacrificed children. Mm-hmm. And this is a joke because at the time that he was writing a lot of his stuff, obscenity laws in Britain wouldn't let you write about masturbation. Mm-hmm. It was against the law to say anything in writing that you were doing for the public about masturbating. And so you had to speak about it in code. And so what's the worst thing you can possibly imagine? Killing and eating children. Mm-hmm. And so, which was not illegal to write about. And so to use the worst possible thing you can imagine as a euphemism for masturbation in order to get around censorship laws is objectively hilarious. And so that's why the joke, it's a joke about censorship laws, which is something I learned from...
Was it like I sacrificed many thousands a year?
yeah. And which is, wow, good for you, buddy.
Yeah.
Take a rest period. And so when he says sacrifice male children, he means semen.
Yeah.
And we have diaries from him around the time his first daughter died, and they're very emotional. Crowley obviously loved being a father. I don't know why he wasn't more present. Like, he knew Rose was a dipsomaniac, which just means alcoholic, and probably not fit to take care of children. So why you would not be there right on top of your fucking wife, so to speak, making sure she was keeping the baby safe. Why she gets sent back to England and you go wander around China and then hear in the Post that your daughter is dead. Maybe not the greatest parent in the world, but we know he cared because the writing is so emotionally effective, and he's doing his HGA operation at the time, so you can see like the struggle with the ritual, and then he becomes physically ill himself, like he comes down with like fucking malaria or something, continues working on the ritual, but like so emotionally impacted that it affects his health in like a really profound way.
Yeah.
Warning.
Listener discretion is strongly advised for the following 15 minutes of discussion. It contains speculation on the possibility of extremely abhorrent acts of SA, based on graphic diary entries which, although written in poetic form, may or may not refer to actual acts. Since this subject will close out the episode, you may prefer to turn it off now, or skip to 2 hours, 36 minutes, and 4 seconds for the closing.
So, like, he loves kids, and he loves being a dad, but he's not the world's greatest father. And during the Kefallu period, we know he's taken cocaine, he's taken heroin, he's doing a wild amount of ritual magic. He's totally off his fucking tits the whole time. He's in this passionate relationship with Leia Hersig, where they're doing all these trespasses, fucking shitting on each other and getting high together and doing all these orgies. And, like, she comes into Crowley's orbit as like a pretty respectable American school teacher and leaves his orbit as a homeless junkie, a homeless penniless junkie who's like writing him all the time begging for money, like, please help. And he's just like, hey, make sure you're getting Thelema going over there in France. Like, it's despicable. And then writing articles about how, like, he's never seen anyone get addicted to heroin when the drug laws are trying to come in, like pretending to be like under a pseudonym that makes him sound like a medical expert. And so from his diaries of the time of one of these like orgiastic experience with the beautiful and talented Leia Herzig. Now I, the god, have choked her god in the dung and breed the basilisk, reared the fiend, Satan Aleister, that's her magical name, Aleister, to burn in hell with me, to burn, to writhe, to exalt, to spend, end, to be, to will, to go, to change, to lust, to create life, to kindle love, to unveil light, to unleash liberty, my word and law, Thelema, to proclaim, to establish and to execute forever, to build the law into man's soul as nature builds man from the fifth primate, her Satan's secret asset brew in her cups blood, filth, madness, poison, enchantment, putrefaction. It aids intoxication in its one mystery of mysteries, initiation. And so you can see the poetic language that's happening around here. Like, some of these things are just like romantic abstractions, kind of like he's as caught up in the ecstasy of writing this as he was in the moment in the sexual interactions with his partner at the time, and which is what people say when they come to the next passage. Oh, you know, it's all just poetic. And I, the worm, have trailed my slow slime across her breast, so that her mother mood is turned and her breast itches with lust of incest. He has given her 2 years old bastard boy to her lewd lover's whim of sodomy, hath taught him speech and act and things infinitely abhorred with her own beastly carcass. She hath tongued her 5-month girl, and asked its father to deflower it. She hath wished her beast to rape her rotten old mother. So far is woman clean of her, and her blood's grown icy hard and cold with hate, and her eyes gleam as her ears ring with the chime of wedding bells, to dirty words, to vibrate catgut fashion, the shrieks of the young, a child that her beast god's slave mate is torturing for her pleasure and his own, since her cup he drank and her soul he breathed. So people will read this and say, like, oh, you know, it's in this like it's in the midst of this sort of like poetic thing about like all the vile shit that they do together, and some of it is obviously poetic fancy, like he didn't rape her mother's corpse because it wasn't there. So like, why should we assume that he actually deflowered a 5-month-old girl? Well, another thing is that he says Aleister bid the child's father to do this. So it's not directly implicating Crowley, it's implicating the child's father. But if you look at the biography, you realize they had children this age at this time who would have been at Kefallu with them. So he's the child's father. And so, like, what does it say? It says, she hath given her 2-year-old bastard boy to her lewd lover's whim of sodomy, hath taught him speech to act. So, like, that's, like, pretty direct. Like, she gave it to his whim. It was his whim. He decided to do it, and she gave the child to him. Then she tongued the 5-month-old girl and asked the father to deflower it. He's not saying he deflowered the 5-month-old girl. He's saying that she asked him to, not making any comment on whether he did or not. But he is saying that she tongued the girl. And then they're saying that the children were screaming because they were being tortured. I don't know how long it is between this and when that girl dies, but the daughter dies. And so you see all through Crowley's corpus the use of this word catamite, which means slave boy specifically kept for sex. Like it's specifically like a pederastic enslavement type of relationship, but it's all poetry. Like it's just about fancy and flowery language and stuff. And often about the relationship of the adept with the angel. Like the adept is a slave boy to the whims of the angel. But so this is the only place that I can see where there's a direct confession that he was like sexually assaulting a child, 2 children on purpose for fun. And then one of them died. Did he fuck her to death? I don't know. Like, probably not. Is this all just more poetry of the same type as like, oh, I sacrificed 1,000 children this morning, LOL. Like, it's not the same tone. And like I found a thread where you can beep the name if you want to, but like someone confronted Jim Eshelman with this online, and Jim had obviously never read it before. He was like, well, let me check the rest of the passage and see if I can figure out the context, as if that fucking matters. And he came back with like, yeah, there's a lot of things in this paragraph that didn't literally happen. Like he didn't eat Layla, he just ate her out. Like that's euphemistic language.
Okay, that doesn't solve the problem.
Yeah, so as we all know, raping a 5-month-old is a common euphemism for what, Jim? For fucking what? For what,
Yeah,
Jim?
Exactly, yeah.
So like, there's no way around this. And again, this is another friend of mine who I won't name because I don't know if she wants me to. The other 2 I know are like out, but I don't know about this person. But her conclusion was just like, yeah, we'll never know what happened. And we just there's no apologetics you can do for this. It just is something he wrote and we have no idea what it means. We can guess, but like it sounds pretty upsetting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and this is like from personal diaries that he
we're
didn't.
not. Yeah, you can tell when he's writing for publication and when he's writing for himself.
Yeah.
This is like private.
Yeah.
The only thing I will say about this is John Simmons, who condemns Crowley for just about everything and being his literary executor, had access to just about everything.
And was one of the co-publishers of this, the Diaries of the Beast 666, which this appears in, right?
Yeah, exactly. He doesn't condemn Crowley for this. He never says Crowley fucked his 5-month-old to death. Just passes over the whole thing. This is one of the reasons I was excited to read the Layla Herzig diaries when Manon Hedenborg White published them last year. I think that's her name. I apologize if I'm forgetting. But she just skips over this period. Maybe the diaries aren't extant, or maybe she begins with the death of the daughter, kind of, and doesn't have any diaries of Leia during this period. But maybe she's so smacked up that she wasn't writing anything.
Yeah, it's possible those were specifically excised from inclusion as well.
I mean, but the thing is, like, even if Crowley is a good guy who loves his kid, they're both so high and so isolated and so like washed away in this like
a big part of the context for this as well is that specifically in the Cefalù period, Crowley especially was trying to confront everything abhorrent to him. So like he's describing. Like the whole shit thing, for instance, like a lot of people will talk about him, that being one of his favorite things. And it's like, well, I mean, yeah, maybe it was, he had a fetish for that, but it's kind of hard to be sure because he might have been specifically exposing himself to like a shit fetish thing as part of this engaging with the abhorrent and that sort of thing, because that was specifically something he was doing at that time.
He wrote about it as if it was one of his favorite things because he had kind of had that experience and was trying to sexualize that experience, like as a way, as like a type of transgression. But in the same diaries, you see he eats Layla's shit and like is so upset.
Yeah.
Like he's just, and he not only is he miserable and like retching for hours afterwards, he then like is in a sick bed for like a week after. Like it doesn't go well.
No.
But yeah, this there's no excuse for it. Like it's just like, I mean, unless it is just poetic writing, in which case I don't care because anyone can write about anything they want. But I strongly suspect this happened. And like it happened because he was, drug-addled and transgressing and in a cultic scenario that he built himself. Like it's not like he was being manipulated by Jim Jones or something. Like he was Jim Jones in this scenario, ruining everybody's life with fucking heroin, and then like possibly raping his kid to death.
And I'm going to take the opposite point of view, not because, again, it's like there's no whitewashing this or anything like that, but specifically just because I do believe in, what Crowley says, and all arguments take the opposing point of view. So just in the spirit of that, it's like, as they're in this, the thing is, there is no excusing it. So I really do have to emphasize that. And there's no attempting to whitewash it or anything like that. But again, this is in the context of just a diary record from a period of time when he's specifically exposing himself to abhorrent things and writing about things in a way that's, he's like
deliberately abhorrent.
Yeah, well, like a lot of the paragraphs that he's writing are more emphasizing the state of mind he's taking on, where he's being subservient, he's being, abused, he's being so it's like, some of those passages, it's like, is he doing this at the same time as he's writing? Well, it's kind of hard to do both things simultaneously, so he's going to have to be writing at a different point in time, even if it's immediately afterwards. But it is like the state of mind that he's in at this time. So we don't know 100% what actually happened versus what the context of his purpose for writing these things is and that sort of thing. So and there do tend to be veils put on things in his writing and that, but it is not a pleasant thing to have to even contemplate.
As my friend says, you'll just never know.
Yeah.
You just never know. And that sometimes that's the fact of history and frustrating.
Yeah.
But hey, maybe we should cut in a trigger warning for this. Like,
I was thinking about that the whole time.
I don't do trigger warnings usually, but like if you
for this specifically,
so many people in the occult have
people.
bad sexual experiences. If you have any if you're not up for graphic descriptions of brutal child sexual assault today, then you can just... This is the last thing we're going to put in the episode, so you can just turn it off. Thanks very much for being here.
You should not have listened to the preceding... No, I'll cut in a break in the thing so it's obvious, because I feel like, I was thinking that...
Well, I was thinking you could just lift that speech and put it in.
I was thinking, but the problem is like, or not the problem, but actually I now, even in contemplating that, I think it'd be better if I even really demarcate it so that it stands out, just in case somebody's, absent-mindedly not really paying attention at the time or something, so it catches their attention. So it'd be like, boop, please stay tuned for... But
This has been a test of the emergency broadcast system. This was only a test. Had this been an actual emergency, the tone you will have just heard would have been followed by detailed instructions. Darren, thanks so much for that. Oh yeah, and
do we want to cleanse the palate before we go? Or
no, I just wanted to say the message is that if you hear anything negative about Crowley, you can just write it off because it's probably rumor. Read the negative things Crowley wrote about himself.
Yeah,
he wrote enough negative stuff. There's plenty to be disgusted by without listening to the rumors.
Well, that's the thing. A lot of the problem with the rumors about him in that is it's always even in the context of somebody who you could just write the truth and it's enough already. the way that people retell anecdotes about Crowley often has an obvious tinge of exaggeration and floweriness about it. So it's kind of like, I mean, you can just go straight to the horse's mouth, or you can, there's plenty of anecdotes that have enough ring of truth to them that you don't need to worry about some of the there's like that A.E. Waite kicking him down the stairs or whatever, or whoever it was, or Yeats. That's what it was. It was or Yates or Yeats. I assume it's Yeats because he yeeted
him down the stairs.
Yeah. But that whole thing is like there's like controversy of online where people are posting like Thelemites don't accept this, but there's obvious evidence, and then they'll point to like something written in 1936 or something like that. It's like, okay, that's not obvious evidence. That's somebody writing about it as a rumor or gossip. And then they'll be like Thelemites downplaying it and giving evidence of it not happening, and it's just the same thing. So
Yeah.
But I have a hard time picturing. There's a place where Crowley says he's describing himself on like when he's in America and in staying at somebody's house, and he's like, I had so much energy, I was like, all I could do is chop wood for 18 hours or something like that. And he's saying, I'm normally of less than average strength, so the fact that I suddenly had this burst of energy from taking the elixir and all this sort of thing, yada, yada, yada. I kind of think it's disingenuous for him to say that he's usually below average strength, because he's like done all these mountain climbing feats and stuff like that. Maybe he was out of shape at this point, but like still, I kind of feel like, especially at this point in time with the Golden Dawn schism in whenever that was, 1902 or whatever it was. I forget the exact date, but basically, I have a hard time picturing Crowley at the prime of his health and life and strength, physical strength and that sort of thing, being yeeted down the stairs by a poet.
Yes.
But, there again, maybe we'll never know the truth.
Yeah, those waifs, all of them, the whole class of poets.
Yeah, a bunch of...
Yeah. Crowley himself, of course, being a poet.
Yeah, so maybe he was in poet mode when it happened.
And he took absinthe and accidentally transformed into a poet.
Yeah.
which meant 100-pound Yeats could yeet 90-pound Crowley down the stairs.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So that was great. Darren, I've been trying to get that off my chest for a while, and it was fun to finally get it on the pod.
Yeah.
If in the third hour of our least listened to episode of the season. But maybe you can clip it and post it straight to YouTube.
Yeah, exactly. We'll just do one of those little one-off videos.
Yeah.
Have it circulate. All right. Well, thanks for joining me as usual, and I'm looking forward to next season as well.
Yeah, I think we need to do the Kant. We need to do the Prolegomena. I wonder if it's time to do the Kant. Kick off the season on a different thread.
Yeah. Let's get wet with some Kant. Let's
get our Kants wet.
Let's twiddle through the Kant. It's time to flick the bean.
Nice one.
Lost it entirely. Lost the thread entirely.
I can't even.
I can't even. All right. Well, anyway, that's a prolegomena to any future reading lists.
The prolegomena to the rest of your life.
Yeah.
93,
Darren. 93. Thanks for listening. Find Toronto Thelema online. Like, comment, share, and subscribe, and help us grow. And join us again in the darkly splendid abodes.
That is going to look great on you. That is a killer color.
I love it, eh?
I like the dog. Can I get a dog like that?
Really, eh?
Yeah, big old German Shepherd.
Not a dog like that, because he does something kind of horrible in the movie at one point. So.
Well, I guess it depends. Can he repeat it on command, or does he just do it spontaneously?
No, it wasn't. It was definitely not on command.
What is this sticker of?
I guess it's for the company, but it's like, it's not exactly.
I think I see ribs and an eye. It's a skeletal something, and then the spinal cord turns into roots, maybe? Nice deep roots. And it seems to have crab claws for hands. But
would
it's
like
very
to-
difficult to tell because it's in the same mustard yellow as your t-shirt.
Yeah,
so if
that's
you want
right.
to just stick it to the arm of
Yeah, I
your
wonder if
t-shirt,
that's
you can tell.
intentional. Yeah, that's a
It's
good point.
silhouetted. So it's very difficult to make anything out.
I like to make a disclaimer that Michael's accent or pronunciation of certain words in no way represents the way that it's pronounced in Canadian.
Canadians prefer to say silhouetted.
Silhouetted. It's a French word, so we say silhouetted.
Silhouetted. Silhouetted that's my French accent.
Je ne parle pas.
Je n'ai pas
Français.
parlé en français, monsieur.
Hear our wonderful Canadian accents.
Yeah. Oh, I can't think of anything that I can't think of anything to say.
Well, thanks as always for coming out.